Chapter 1502. In the huge desert that shone with a golden radiance, there was an area that suddenly became abnormally dark. The light was suppressed by an indescribable power, and the desert lost its luster. Fierce winds blew between heaven and earth, and surging energy rolled in the sky, adding a hint of strangeness to this already dark area. I say, are we really going to go in? Yin Nuashing and his companions stood in a dark desert that did not look like a naturally formed terrain at first glance. The sand around them sank like a staircase. They were now standing at the bottom of this huge trapezoidal pit, about 100 meters down. And at the bottom, how should he put it? There seemed to be a cave hole, which made Yin Nuashing sigh with emotion. He might have been a gopher in his previous life. Whether it was in the realm of the gods or in other worlds, the thing he did the most was to burrow into the ground. The strongest reaction of the abyssal death mist is coming from this place. Do you think we should go in? We glanced at Maple, who had suddenly entered a convulsive state and started to mumble. He did not understand why Maple had suddenly turned into a statue and scratched his head in puzzlement. If you think there's a problem, why don't you stay up here and I'll go down and take a look? It's not that there's a problem. Forget it. It's nothing. Yin Nuashing sighed and shook his head, shaking off the strange thought that had been triggered. Let's go. Time waits for no one. Hui scratched his cheek, flattened his mouth, and followed the two behemoths into the cavern at the bottom of the trapezoidal pit. The presence of the abyssal death mist that came rushing at them thickened instantly when it crossed the boundary between the inside and the outside of the cavern. The color of the octopus and the seahorse began to change again, but Hui quickly put a barrier over them to suppress the influence of the abyssal death mist on them. He frowned. They had been in contact with the abyssal death mist for a long time and could quickly get used to the oppressive and eerie environment. But he could feel that the abyssal death mist they faced this time was unprecedentedly strong and eerie, and perhaps it was why it emitted that strange stench. This is not an underground cavern. This is a conceptual layered space. Yin Nuashing, who was walking in front, suddenly stopped and spoke. He suddenly lifted his foot and stomped on the ground. The whole crypt suddenly trembled violently. The trembling lasted for about 10 seconds, shaking off a handful of dust on the top of the cave. Then, it slowly returned to normal. The surrounding scene was like a dream returning to reality. Most of the space suddenly became blurry, as if it had sunk into water and became transparent. The transparent space shook for a while, expanded a part of it, and became stuck. Then, it returned to normal little by little. It was so normal that nothing had happened. We also understood something from this and couldn't help but frown. Sure enough, but it's really hard. It seems that there's no way to break it easily. I can tell. Yin Nuashing nodded and didn't take any drastic measures. Let's not worry about it for now. Let's go down and see what's down there. His sudden movement accidentally scared the two creatures. They trembled for a moment, and when they saw the strange and incomprehensible scene, they were so scared that their tentacles curled up. Other than the slight movement when they first came in, the rest of the journey was peaceful. This sealed space was only about 10 meters high, but from the senses of the body, there seemed to be no limit to the size of the cave. Their eyes and their own senses made a mistake in their judgment. The two dominators were moving around and felt uncomfortable all over. They kept touching their eyes, and their tentacles curled and straightened repeatedly. Yin Nuashing and the others were already used to the various abnormal situations in the abyssal death mist. They didn't care about those and were very alert as they walked deeper into the cave. They were alert and focused, and their minds were a little out of control. But soon, his wandering thoughts were pulled back to the original place. Yin Nuashing had just blinked when he suddenly caught a glimpse of something from the corner of his eye. It was dark like a shadow. In this dark place affected by the abyssal death mist, it was not particularly easy to identify. He was stunned for a moment. Just as he was about to focus, Huey's loud reminder made him quickly come back to his senses. Be careful. It's a manifestation. Yin Nuashing, who was about to do something, felt a familiar energy aura and put down his raised hand. Then he saw Huey's figure charge forward with a golden light. A wave of energy movement that was not too intense, but very powerful, came from not far away. The golden light illuminated the dark underground, dispersing part of the abyssal death mist that was lingering here. He just happened to see Hui crush an abyssal death mist manifestation with one hand, and it disappeared into nothingness. A humanoid manifestation, and it's very small. How strange. Hui clapped his hands and walked back to Yin Nuoxing's side. But this place is so thin, yet the abyssal death mist can give birth to a manifestation. I seem to have thought of something. Feng, did you think of anything? Didn't you say you thought of something? Why did you turn around and ask me? Yin Nuoxing was stunned for a moment, his eyes wide open. Oh, can't you be more reliable? Tell me. Hui moved closer to Yin Nuoxing with a flattering smile, but was mercilessly pushed away by the latter, who said flatly, Instinct, what else could it be? Some of the basic rules of the abyssal death mist should be some kind of command that would make it subconsciously transform itself into something. Perhaps the manifestation formed by the abyssal death mist is some kind of instinct. In short, the sudden appearance of a barely formed manifestation, it was just a vague humanoid manifestation that had not evolved to a very clear state. Furthermore, it seemed to have great power, but did not seem to know how to use it, and did not react to Huey's sudden attack. It succeeded in making the already strange atmosphere a little more tense, although the source of that tension was the octopus and the seahorse who had curled into two 1-meter-sized balls. Those two fellows had never seen such a scene, and instinctively adopted a defensive posture that they felt was the safest. The energy in Yin Nuoxing's body began to surge. This was not the time to be merciful or anything. If they did not handle the manifestation of the abyssal death mist properly, they would be screwed. Furthermore, the abyssal death mist in this place was unprecedentedly thick and strong, so there was no way they could relax. If necessary, they would still have to act even if it would alarm the world's consciousness. Meanwhile, the manifestations of the abyssal death mist usually came in groups. The appearance of one was merely a warning to them, telling them that there would be an army of abyssal death mist behind them. However, they were already prepared. After all, this world was still formed by the abyssal death mist. If two manifestations did not appear, they would feel that something was missing. Bang! Just as they turned a corner, a powerful energy blast suddenly came at them, causing the distracted Yin Nuoxing to snap back to reality. She casually swung the Netherruin sword forward and cut the oncoming abyssal death mist in half, bypassing them and crashing into the rock wall behind them, causing the entire space in the cave to tremble. Oh, this number is a little interesting. There's something to it. Hui turned a corner and whistled. After turning a corner, a steep cliff appeared, and at the bottom of the cliff was a large group of black humanoid manifestations. Their bodies were surging with dark red energy, and they were shrieking like malicious spirits, causing the conceptual space to tremble slightly. Most of these things are newly formed. Yin Nuoxing gestured at the space below the cliff with the Netherruin sword and said, It probably sensed that we were coming here, and realized that it could not stop us with the people outside, so it hurriedly gathered the manifestations and sped up its steps to create more. Yin Nuoxing glanced at Hui as she said, I actually hope that I won't encounter these things when I finally come out for a vacation. Hui grinned. You wish. Didn't you just say that you haven't finished the scavenger mission? Now you're starting to daydream. Yin Nuoxing let out a long sigh and shook his head. He picked up the Netherruin sword and strode forward. Suddenly, he leapt high into the air. The Netherruin sword in his hand drew a purplish-black arc in the air as he smashed into the bottom of the cliff with his sword. The tremendous energy shockwave caused the entire space to tremble violently. The energy shockwave, visible to the naked eye, destroyed swathes of the manifestations and tossed the rest into the sky. Hui followed closely behind Yin Nuoxing's footsteps. With a loud shout, he charged into the battlefield with a brilliant golden light. He was like a golden shooting star that caused the space that was already on the verge of collapse to tremble nonstop. At the side, the little octopus and the little seahorse had already hugged each other and were trembling. They had never seen such a scene before. What was going on? How could there be such a terrifying life form in this world? And such a terrifying little thing? They should just watch from the sidelines, right? They shouldn't have to go down and fight. Yin Nuashing and Hui were having fun at the bottom of the cliff with all their might. Just as they were about to release all their energy, they suddenly realized that there weren't many manifestations left. Both of them were stunned when they saw this. We saw that there weren't many manifestations left in an instant, and he stopped the sword in his hand in a daze. Finished. Yin Nuashing had used a miniaturized magic formation and the Netherworld ruins sword to clean up. It had only been half a minute since the start of the battle, and she was already cleaning up the remnants of the defeated troops. He looked at the empty space around them, hesitated for a while, and then nodded. Seems like it's finished. We couldn't help but smile bitterly. He had used a shocking entrance to smash this space into smithereens. He was about to unleash his rule domain and various powers, and then it was over. There was only a difference of 1 or 2 minutes between the beginning and the end. It felt like when he had gathered all his energy and was about to rush through the void, the other side suddenly surrendered. This wasn't holding back. This was inexplicable. All right. In any case, he also felt that it was impossible to fight in this world. Suddenly, a small group of abyss death mist manifestations appeared and made him dream back to the battlefield 100 million years ago. He was about to fight when he suddenly woke up, and then, well, now there wasn't even a single manifestation left. Let's go. Seems like this is all. Let's continue forward. Yin Nuashing looked up and said subconsciously. Then, she froze. They had already reached the end of this conceptual space, and there was nothing left. Oh, there's no need to continue. We seem to have reached the end. This is the place. Hui lifted his foot and walked around twice. Suddenly, he closed his eyes as if he was sensing something. Then, he stomped on the ground, which had already spread countless cracks but had yet to collapse. He glanced down and waved at Yin Nuashing. Feng, quickly come and take a look. I found something here. Yin Nuashing turned around and saw that Hui had already jumped down into the hole. Without thinking, he jumped down as well. His body fell tens of meters and suddenly landed on another piece of ground. Pudgy. Yin Nuashing was stunned. He seemed to have stepped on something soft with a slight curvature. It looked like a tree root, but he didn't care about that for the time being. He saw Hui standing at the side, looking ahead, and couldn't help but smack his lips. He also raised his head. This was a spacious underground hall. The color and light were gloomy and dim. The only light came from the front. It was a wall, a black wall that flickered with a dark red light. In the middle of the wall, there was an obvious curvature like an eardrum, and around the wall, there were many root-like things spreading in all directions, spreading to the ceiling, the other walls, and the ground. His gaze followed one of the roots and saw under his feet. Well, he saw the thing that made a pudgy sound when he stepped on it. It was that root-like thing. This thing was soft like a blood vessel, and together with the wall, it looked like some kind of huge tissue. It didn't look like anything good. This thing is really spectacular. We looked left and right, then squatted down and poked this soft root-like thing. It was like a water bag filled with water, and it was difficult to poke it with a little force. Phone, do you know what this is? Even if I'm a void encyclopedia. Yin Nuashing helplessly crossed his arms and shook his head. But this is a new world that has never been recorded. How would I know what this thing is? Have you seen anything like this in the abyssal death fog before? Hui shook his head without thinking. I remember all the abyssal death fog that I've seen, so I really haven't seen anything like this, but okay, I know. I'll analyze it. You can shut up. Yin Nuashing gnashed his teeth and glared at Hui. Seeing Hui smile and scratch his head, Yin Nuashing sighed and walked forward. This guy was obviously a heavenly god, but he had to let him do these things. Yin Nuashing even felt that this guy's heavenly god primeval, white, had leveled up. Standing in front of this huge wall that looked like some kind of biological tissue, Yin Nuashing pondered for a moment and pressed his hand on the wall. Then he suddenly withdrew his hand and said concisely, "It's alive. It's some kind of tissue with a living body." After saying that, He took a few steps back and pondered for a moment. Hui, do you think the abyssal death fog can create a material life form? Ah, this, theoretically. Well, after all, even the wrong life form that was born from the loopholes of the rules exists, right? It doesn't seem unacceptable for one or two material life forms to emerge from the abyssal death fog. Hui was speechless as he spoke. Bulsh asterisk T. How can there be such a strange thing in the void? The abyssal death mist, regardless of whether it was the group of low-intelligence creatures that were manifestations or the little angel and origin sky that were life forms, they were all energy life forms that were directly born from the abyssal death mist. However, if they wanted the abyssal death mist to give birth to a material life form, Yin Nuashing and the others really couldn't understand what kind of complicated process they had to go through to create one. I don't understand either. Yin Nuashing shrugged. He raised his chin and pointed at the huge wall in front of them. But the truth is in front of us. Although that is not even a formed life form, it should belong to a part of a material life form. A part. Yes, even if it is just a part, an organ, it still belongs to a material life form. Oh, that's weird. We scratched his head hard and then frowned. But material life forms are inefficient, and fragile things. Is it fun to imprison one's spirit and soul in a shell that has loopholes in every aspect? Being an energy life form, being able to change into whatever life form it wants, being able to experience reality and being free. Isn't that nice? You can be merciful. You have been through that stage yourself. Yin Nuashing's cheeks twitched. Hui laughed dryly. I'm used to it. Ahem, let's not talk about my opinion first. It can't be that its brain is really stuck in a door to create such a weird thing, right? Only God knows. Yin Nuashing shook his head. Suddenly, an idea flashed through his mind. You reminded me. After all, it is just a consciousness. It has not formed, and it is very fragile in its growth stage. If it urgently needs to do something at this stage to affect the world without affecting its slowly growing consciousness, then the best way is not to go through the trouble of creating an energy life form to walk the world. Using the cheapest way to directly affect the world is actually the most convenient. After all, it is equivalent to changing its own body structure. Oh, I made something that I wanted to use to influence this world. We understood. An energy life form that was not very condensed and conceptual would have a very weak impact on the world. That level of energy life form was no different from shadow. Naturally, it could not be compared to the final form of an energy life form like them. However, its consciousness was still growing and was still very fragile. There were many limitations. It naturally could not reach their level, so it could only forcefully change a part of its body to affect the world. This thing doesn't look like anything good. Should we destroy it? Yin Nuashing reached out his hand and pointed straight ahead. The energy began to surge, converge, and was about to burst out. If we destroy it, it is equivalent to declaring war on the world's consciousness. Hui raised his eyebrows and said calmly, "It is not a good idea to leave it here and let it accumulate energy to create a body. Since we have found out that it can create a body, then we don't have to care about order or not. That is something that can't be helped. Destroying it will save us some trouble." As Yin Nuashing spoke, the energy gathered in his hand suddenly burst out. Huey's words only gave him a choice. If possible, he did not want to fall out with the world's consciousness. However, since it had expressed such a stance, then destroy it. The dark red energy that was like a long sword instantly pierced through the huge life form's tissue. The expected blood and liquid did not gush out. The place where the wall was pierced seemed to have become crystallized. Several huge fragments were blasted out by the dark red energy. Then, the wall suddenly burst out with an extremely bright dark red light. It was so bright that it was as if a star was shining in front of their eyes. An abnormal surge of energy suddenly burst out from the wall and spread to every root. The entire underground space suddenly became abnormally bright. Yin Nuashing and Hui were stunned. They shouted in their hearts at the same time, Not good. It's going to explode. Retreat. Without a loud cry. He grabbed Yin Nuoxing's arm and rushed out of the cave. Then, with a sudden attack, he rushed towards the direction of the cave. He grabbed the little octopus and the little seahorse who were huddled together with a confused look on their faces and rushed out of the cave. The black light mixed with dark red was abnormally bright and dazzling behind them. Boom! An earth-shattering roar shook the entire sea of sand with shock waves. A red and black mushroom cloud gradually rose from the horizon. Chapter 1503. So, why is it that in the end, if we don't run into trouble, then it will turn into an explosion? A few hundred meters in the air, we looked at the mushroom cloud rising from the ground and could not help but whistle. He sniffed and said, "Well, this is an explosion with a smell. It's like digging in feces with one's hand. Stop talking, it's disgusting." Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes. The explosion of the huge and inexplicable biological tissue had released an unusually large amount of energy, including the stench of decay. The smell had spread out, and no one within 100 miles would be able to survive. However, the 100 miles around the surging zone was a forbidden zone for life. Not to mention humans, even sandworms were rare. After watching the mushroom cloud roll for half an hour, the abyssal death shroud that filled the area gradually dissipated. Yin Nuoxing opened a crack in the space and threw all the abyssal death shroud into the void to purify it. After the mushroom cloud had completely disappeared, he looked in another direction. Where's the other place? This question was directed at the dominators of the two surging zones. After a while, Yin Nuoxing heard a buzzing sound in his head. However, this time, the sound was much softer and sharper. It seemed to be coming from the side. He lowered his head and saw a palm-sized octopus curled up on his shoulder. He could not help but be stunned. "What are you doing? Acting cute?" One of the dominators of the surging zone mumbled timidly. After destroying the inexplicable abyssal death shroud, the uncomfortable and unpleasant atmosphere that lingered in the sea of sand had suddenly dissipated. The energy in the surging zone did not change. It was just like the sky after the rain, and the sun had come out from behind the thick clouds to stretch itself. After settling the matter of this place, Yin Nuoxing and Hui wanted to land on the sea of sand again. Suddenly, they remembered that there was a large group of ships waiting for them outside the surging zone. There were more forces coming from every corner of the sea of sand. When they thought of this, they felt a little bit of a headache. Forget it, let's not care about them. We suddenly let out a long sigh. He reached out and grabbed Yin Nuoxing as they flew across the sky. After passing through a layer of order barrier enveloped the two of them. "And I found something." Yin Nuoxing looked at Hui in surprise, as if a certain lazy bastard could actually use his brain to think. She exclaimed loudly, "You can actually think by yourself." Hui, although he often threw many problems to Maple to think and solve, it was not because he was too lazy. Professional matters should be left to the professionals. He was more suited to stand by and do nothing. Sometimes he also felt that it would be good if he could let Maple enter this realm. The benefits of letting Maple enter this realm would be greater than him entering the realm of Premier. Since when could entering the primeval stage be measured by benefits? In any case, that was what it meant. Yin Nuoxing tilted her head and looked at the guy who had suddenly fallen into deep thought. After a while, she pulled her hand out of his and reminded him, "You haven't told me what you found. We're almost at the edge of that area. If you want to say something, say it now." "Oh, you'll know when you get there." Hui came back to his senses. He showed a row of big white teeth and gave her a thumbs up. "When I see it, I don't need to say anything. Your words will be seen through at a glance." Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes at him and was about to quarrel with him. Then, her expression suddenly changed, and she stopped in midair. Hui saw it and stopped as well. He had an I knew it look on his face. He crossed his arms and laughed nonstop. They had now arrived at the edge of the surging zone. The sea of sand beneath them was an exceptionally spectacular sight. Ships of all sizes ranging from thousands of feet to tens of thousands of feet in size were densely packed and orderly lined up at the edge of the surging zone. The ships painted in various colors were woven into a huge net as if they were waiting for something. Furthermore, the many energy stones carried on the ships were also emitting energy reactions that were unusually shocking for this world. Judging from the situation, they would probably be greeted with a barrage of cannons the moment they showed themselves. If this happened in the void, it would be the same situation as them gathering the power of order to deal with the abyssal death shroud, except that they were the ones being dealt with here. A certain octopus and a certain seahorse glanced down, and then felt the need to hide behind the two of them. There were too many things that they had not seen today, and they could not react to it all. Abyssal death mist. Yin Nuashing suddenly murmured. They didn't sense it at first, but now that so many people had gathered here to fish, they finally sensed the faint reaction of the abyss death mist. Moreover, it was coming from all the people on the ships. It was too weak, and they couldn't sense it at all if they sensed it alone. Even with so many people gathered together, they could only faintly sense its existence. It's probably using the weak abyssal death mist to control them. With the power of the abyssal death mist, it would be easy to control these mortals whose strength, spirit, and soul are not strong. Even if it's just a small part of its power, it would be enough to give them a mental hint. They would not even know what they are doing. We came up to them and whispered. I thought it was strange that the world consciousness could mobilize these powers. Now that I see it, there is indeed a problem, right? Yin Nuashing tilted her head. Breaking a pot when it has nothing to lose? I'm not sure about that. I felt something was wrong and unnatural from the start. By the way, which world consciousness could affect its own world to such an extent? The world you are looking at is not a normal world. Yin Nuashing shook her head. Looking at the fleet that was still gathering below, she suddenly thought of the world that Tao Heaven came from. It was like this when the Age of Chaos came. All life in the world would suddenly lose their minds and gather together to slap each other. It was just that here, they were all gathered together to slap the two of them. Suddenly, a weak energy fluctuation came from the sky, making Yin Nuashing and Hui tremble. There was an inexplicable power descending from the concept layer and accurately finding the two of them. However, the part of the power that was mobilized was too weak. Even their barrier did not ripple. It found us. Looks like we can't hide. We spread his hands helplessly. But the warning this time seems to be a little more direct. This guy is directly mobilizing the rule power to suppress us. Also, it seems to be a little weaker. Yin Nuashing played with her long hair. After a while, she said, let's go. Ignore them. If it doesn't want to show itself, let it continue to hide. When it can't hide anymore, it will naturally jump out. It will only be more anxious than us. A newborn consciousness, I want to see what kind of waves it can stir up. We looked into the distance a few times, and a strange feeling arose in his heart for no reason. The waves couldn't make much waves, but it wasn't difficult to create some trouble for them. After all, this was still the world it controlled. It was just that there were too many strange things in this world. There were too many inconsistencies and unreasonable places. The movement in the second surging zone was much smaller than the first. The energy presence here was also a little different. There was an indescribable energy flowing between heaven and earth. It was a little like the distorted abyssal death shroud, where the energy presence produced after the abyssal death shroud and order forces clashed. It was a situation where they could not be separated. It was also an underground cavern. There was also a group of abyssal death shroud spawns guarding this place. Moreover, the spawns guarding this place were all new and newly created. It was probably forced by the duo to the point that it had a desire to live. It could see them, and it had been watching them all the way to this place. They did not know what it was doing, but it seemed to be very important. The more nervous it was about the defense of this place, the more suspicious Yin Nuashing and the others felt, and the more ruthless they attacked. By the time the two of them had gotten rid of a large number of derivatives with ease and found the underground cavern where the unknown biological tissue was stored, Yin Nuashing and the others were slightly stunned. There was still a huge biological tissue in front of them, but it did not look like a wall like the first one they saw. It was a huge sarcoma hanging in midair in the cavern. Two strands of fibrous tissue that looked like tree branches extended out from both ends of the sarcoma and finally wrapped around the ground at both ends, spreading out like tree roots. The entire underground cavern was a sarcoma and a tree root-like object. As for the touch, it was the same as the first object, like a blood vessel, like a water bag. Yin Nuoxing and Hui looked at each other. The former stepped forward to examine the sarcoma. Suddenly, she raised her right hand. Dark red energy gathered on her right hand and stabbed into the sarcoma like a knife. She thought she would see the crystal shattering and the energy spilling out. Instead, she saw a dark red liquid spewing out from inside. Yin Nuoxing was so frightened that she quickly pulled her hand back and took a few steps back. EW. So disgusting. We also took a few steps back with an unbearable expression on his face. The two of them stood a few meters away and watched the tumor spurt out blood. A strong stench suddenly filled the underground cave, causing the two of them to roll their eyes. Hui quickly covered his nose. When I came in, I didn't feel the stench. I thought it was over. I didn't expect it to be hidden here. Yin Nuoxing raised her head and looked at the sarcoma. She lowered her head and looked at her hand. She felt a wave of nausea. She wailed and shook her hand vigorously. My hand. It's rotten. It's rotten. It's discolored. It's rotten. Hui was speechless. How could an energy life form rot? But he could understand Maple's feelings. This time, he really put his hand into a cesspool. This was not a matter of disgust. This was a fact. The liquid with the stench of decay quickly turned into gas and dissipated in the air after it was sprayed on the ground. That was the energy compressed in a liquid. When the sarcoma spat out all the liquid energy and became dry, there was not a single drop of water in the underground cavern. Only the ominous energy that was so dense that it turned into fog lingered here. Well, how should I put it? It was really smelly, and fishy. Hui touched Yin Nuoxing's arm with his arm. There's no water. There seems to be something inside. At this moment, the shriveled sarcoma emitted a faint energy light from the center. The dark red color looked like a solidified blood clot, which inexplicably made people's hearts palpitate a little. Hui used his Sword of the Guardian to poke the shriveled sarcoma with only a layer of skin left. He then picked up the skin from where Yin Nuoxing had dug out her hand. Both of them craned their necks to look inside and saw the light source. The internal structure was more like a sarcoma. There were hideous blood vessel-like tissues inside, glowing with an unpleasant dark red light. After losing the rich energy, they still emitted a faint fluorescent light that wandered around the inner wall of the sarcoma. Only some residual tissues were still twitching and agitating. In the center, there was a regular oval thing hanging in the middle like the sarcoma. It looked like a core or an egg. An egg. Hui frowned. But even if it's an egg, it can't hatch anything. This thing is more like a core. As he spoke, he poked the oval with his sword. It was hard, and the surface was a little bumpy. It was not round at all. There were many small things like tendons and blood vessels wrapped around it. They were very, very small. It was difficult to see them without a layer of skin. Hui glanced at Yin Nuoxing, who had a disgusted look on his face, laughed, and suppressed the thoughts in his stomach. He stretched out his holy sword and cut off all the things that were connected to the oval core and the things around it. Then he used a layer of energy to wrap that thing and pulled it out. When it was pulled out, there were still some things that were connected to it. When it was pulled out of the sarcoma, those things were all torn apart with a burst of energy. In the end, it was taken out without any damage. Yin Nuoxing glanced at it. His cheeks twitched fiercely, and he quickly took a step back. Don't give it to me. I'm a clean freak. I was so disgusted just now. Yin Nuoxing saw that Hui intended to give it to her. She took a few more steps back with a look of disgust. She covered her nose and shook her hands vigorously. Hui smiled bitterly. He had no choice but to look at it carefully. However, when he began to observe, he saw Yin Nuoxing carefully coming over from a distance. She looked curious but wanted to keep a distance. This made him want to play with her. But when he thought about the consequences of teasing Maple, Hui fiercely suppressed the uncontrollable thoughts that were born in his heart. His expression twisted for a while before it completely disappeared. He let out a long sigh of relief. It looks like an energy core, an energy crystal. Yin Nuashing condensed a stick out of energy and poked the oval thing a few feet away. After it was pulled out of the sarcoma, its surface became very smooth. The things that were connected to it all fell off. Then there was nothing special. It was filled with pure energy of the abyssal death mist and non-order rules. After a while, she muttered, "It doesn't look like a crystal of the abyssal death mist. It also has some kind of residual reaction after being cut off from a biological tissue. However, there is no breath of life. It's dead, but it has a state of being alive. I can tell if it's a thing made by order rules. Other than that, there's nothing else." "Stupid thing." Yin Nuashing was stunned. She looked at Hui blankly and tilted her head in puzzlement. "Why are you suddenly scolding me?" Hui was still listening to the lecture humbly just now. Now that he was glanced at, he was a little stunned. His face was full of grievance and confusion. He scratched his head like an ignorant child. "I was just listening to the lecture. Why did you suddenly?" "I didn't open my mouth just now." Yin Nuashing's voice was a little cold when she heard that. Hui would not lie to her, and she would not directly scold him in such a way. Usually, she would use a cheap and teasing tone to flirt. So, she looked at the oval thing that her energy stick was pointing at in the next second. She raised her hand and slammed the stick on it. "Who the hell are you scolding?" "Idiot, you will pay for your reckless behavior. Arg, arg, what you have done to me. Arg, I will return everything 100 times. Woof woof, everything." The oval thing suddenly lit up, and for some unknown reason, it suddenly opened its mouth. As soon as it opened its mouth, it spat out a fragrance that made Yin Nuashing's face turn black. He hit again with the stick, and then it responded with a threat, and was hit again. It continued to threaten and continued. Oh, right, this time its voice echoed directly in the underground cave, so Hui and the two little ones could hear it clearly. The two cowards from the surging area had already huddled together, trembling. They curled up and realized that nothing was wrong, so they gathered their courage and went forward to watch. Hui, on the other hand, stared at Maple and the oval ball that he had beaten up with a look of wonder and amazement. "Enough. You are an unreasonable outsider. Arg, violent, barbaric, imbecile, bastard." Bang. This time, the fellow did not even finish cursing before he was hit by Yin Nuashing's stick. He was sent spiraling into the sky and embedded into the ceiling. Hui pointed up with a cold and indifferent face. "Is that the consciousness of this world?" Yin Nuashing swung the bat at her hand. Her face was blank. "Probably, maybe. It is the only thing that can accurately say that we are outsiders. But did you notice that its voice seems a little familiar?" "No, I didn't recognize it." Yin Nuashing waved her hand and brought the ball in front of her. She hit it hard with the bat again. "If you spit out that fragrance again, I will cut you into 10,000 pieces and feed them to the sandworms. You will become 10,000 pieces of feces and be recycled 1,000,000 times. If you can't digest it, I will put you in the sandworms' stomachs and banish you forever." "Bah, you think I'm scared? Let me tell you, if I'm scared today, I will not be Yin%. Don't hit me if you have the ability. Shut up if you have the ability." Hui and the two little ones were stunned. Chapter 1504. Using the power of order, he tied up the strange, oval black ball into a dumpling, grabbed it and swung around in the air a few hundred times. After giving it a godlike treatment, it finally quieted down completely. Of course, it could also be that it was dizzy from being swung around by him, and had yet to recover from the shock and could not say a word. Anyway, this is the first time I've seen a product of the abyssal death mist that can nag so much. We looked at the ball that was being held by Yin Nuashing with the net of order behind her back, and could not help but mutter. This thing had inherited the usual characteristics of the abyssal death mist. It was brainless and a little silly, and it was also a little talkative. It used all kinds of curses one after another, and it still had not run out of words. No one knew where this newborn consciousness learned so many words. It did not matter if it had fainted or shut up because of fear. In short, it had finally quieted down. Yin Nuoxing looked at Hui tiredly and unconsciously swung the rugby ball in her hand. After a moment, she waved her hand and jumped in the direction of the ground. Hui quickly followed with the two little ones. The two of them were standing in the cave, and before they could begin to think about the next action plan, a dull thud suddenly came from the ground, and then suddenly caused a huge echo in the underground cave. The sudden movement startled the two of them. Yin Nuoxing raised his head and looked in all directions. The sound just now was abnormally strange. It was as if they were living in a narrow wooden barrel, and then one day, the wooden barrel was suddenly punched from the outside. The violent roar was mixed with some strange sounds, like the shattering of energy crystals, the collapse of cliffs and precipitous cliffs, causing a huge commotion. It made people wonder if the consciousness of this world was finally stimulated to the point that it wanted to perish together with them. Guliulu. Guliulu, the little octopus, and the little seahorse cried out at the same time. They sounded calm, and there was only a little panic in their voices. They looked in the same direction at the same time, as if they knew the source of the movement and what had happened. Their nervous voices were transmitted to the minds of Yun, Nuoxing, and Hui. That blue and black sea. What happened to the sea of the world? Yin Nuoxing caught some key words and asked the two little ones. Yin Nuoxing was confused. They said that they did not know, but every time there was a big movement or a big change, it was caused by the ocean. However, as they lived in the desert, they did not know what exactly would happen. They did not witness it with their own eyes. They could feel the huge movement coming from the direction of the coast across the desert. There was also the aftermath of the energy, as if the sky was falling and the earth was cracking. Based on my understanding of you, the little angel couldn't help but ask. Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes and muttered, "Don't say any more. I admit defeat. Forcing two things together can easily bring chaos to the world. For the long-term peace and stability of the void, I suggest, after a while, he didn't continue." The little angel couldn't help but ask, "What do you suggest? Get rid of the law of the void and make a new one." The little angel was speechless. What a dangerous and explosive thing. After being tricked by the law of the void for so long, he planned to kill the law of the void as well. However, she felt that even if the law of the void was rewritten, they would still be in trouble. They were all made by the will of the void. The two quickly came to the sky and saw that the entire desert was shaking as if it was convulsing. In the distance, the desert peak, which was hundreds of meters high, was shaking its body crazily, shaking off the sand stuck to its body like a sieve. Yellow sand was flying all over the sky. Gradually, it was as if a sandstorm had rolled up between heaven and earth. It was all golden sand. However, the desert and the land were shaking. The sky did not show any signs, the space did not tremble, and the other energy did not move either. The only thing that moved was the land. Well, maybe the tremors of the sea of the world had reached the desert and they felt it. But what kind of tremors could make the two lands so far apart affect each other? Phone, look, it seems to be slowing down. We tugged on Yun Nuoxing's sleeve and pointed to the land. The shaking of the entire desert was indeed showing signs of calming down. The shaking desert peak also slowly retracted its afterimage. Yin Nuoxing saw this and was about to look away to the sea of the world. Then boom, boom. It was as if the world had suddenly turned upside down, and there was the sound of the continental plates suddenly breaking. That loud sound was not an energy explosion, nor was it the sound of some kind of battle. It was a very simple sound, amplifying the sound of breaking wood by 100 million times and changing the material to steel. Yin Nuoxing and the others were frightened by this earth-shattering sound. They subconsciously shrank their heads. Then they saw the entire land in front of them suddenly caved in, and a huge area completely collapsed. When the two of them immediately thought of quicksand and other desert phenomena, they suddenly felt some shadows shrouding them. When they turned around, they saw a large piece of land with a desert approaching them. When they saw this scene, they were completely stunned. The sea of sand was slowly approaching them at a constant speed. It was because the land had suddenly tilted up, forming a sharp angle with the horizontal land. At this moment, the sea of sand was really surging toward the place where the big pit had suddenly appeared on the ground like an ocean. The desert mountain slowly collapsed as it tilted, and large pieces of it fell down, finally crashing into the big crack. They thought that the endless sand that could see the sea of sand would fill up the big crack formed by the folding plate. Then, Yin Nuashing and the others heard a wave of crashing tides reverberating between heaven and earth. They looked around, but did not find any energy movement. In the end, he reacted the fastest and looked down. He saw that the crack that had been folded suddenly surged with foam-like seawater. It was not pure blue seawater, but black seawater that seemed to be dyed with ink, slapping together with the sea of sand, causing a monstrous white foam to rise into the sky. There's also an ocean under this inland? Hui expressed his astonishment. He stared blankly at the sea water that poured directly into the inland. All kinds of sayings such as inland big island, island-shaped land, floating land, and so on were running through his mind. His mind was in a mess. Don't worry about that. Let's go first. Yin Nuashing looked at the tilted land rapidly approaching them, almost forming a right angle with the horizontal land. She reached out and grabbed Hui, flying higher into the sky. When they reached a higher place, they saw an even more shocking scene. Not only the land below them, but the entire inland of the sea of sand had such movements. The smallest tilted land might have a radius of 70 to 80 miles, while the largest and longest end was probably more than 10,000 miles long. Those tilted or right angles on the land were like mountains standing on a sea of sand. Looking at it, it was an inexplicable feeling. The crashing sound of the tides reverberated between heaven and earth. The sea of sand seemed to have really become an ocean, but the sea water only surged at the place where it broke apart and did not surge up. It looked like the towering mountains were surrounded by the sea. Half of the mountain was soaked in the sea for countless years and was covered with traces of scouring. There were also many inexplicable sea creatures attached to it. As the trembling and tilted mountain peak, many of them fell from the mountain peak and returned to the sea. On the other hand, the dry land covered by yellow sand presented two completely different scenes and colors under the illumination of the sun. It looked particularly strange in this scene. The whole process of the earth shaking lasted for about 12 minutes and gradually calmed down. As for the movements of the inland and the coastal city, forget it. Under such circumstances, what could they do? The people who lived on the land that had not been uplifted and were still there should be burning incense and thanking God for not treating the land they lived on as a seesaw. There was indeed a considerable area of the sea of sand that still maintained its normal appearance. It was just that the tremor just now had caused many canyon-like cracks to appear in the sea of sand. Those cracks basically penetrated the entire inland and led to the sea below. Standing at the edge of the cliff and listening carefully, one could hear the thundering echoes of the sea of sand. As for the other uplifted lands, Yin Nuashing looked at the entire land and could not help but fall silent. It was like a rugged mountain peak with strange rocks. The slanted ones were like a machete, and the upright ones were like a tall tower. The sun shone on the sea of sand and cast a large shadow on the land. The air was still filled with the smell of seawater and some things that had been soaked in it. It was a little fishy. This scene is spectacular. Huey's expression was solemn for a long time, and he could not help but say this. The surging area, Yin Nuashing said solemnly and calmly. He glanced at Hui and said, the surging area has been separated. The surging area of the sea of sand and the surging area of the world sea are connected. Oh. Hui crossed his arms and nodded seriously. He looked at Yin Nuashing's eyes with a serious expression. After a moment of silence, he said in a deep voice, then what will happen? Yin Nuashing, you've been waiting for so long, and then you're telling me this. After being fiercely glared at by Yin Nuashing, Hui immediately became well-behaved. Cough, cough. All right, what's next is very, Phone, I really forgot. Can you remind me? Yin Nuashing was so angry that he laughed. He looked around for something hard to help him recall, but he could not find anything suitable after a long time. So, he gave up and let out a long sigh. The surging area is just like the dragon vein in the divine realm. If it is suddenly broken, it will leak a lot of pure energy, but it will not take long for the laws to repair itself and form a dead end. However, if it is broken and connected with other parts of the dragon vein, it will form a new energy cycle, which in turn will affect the area affected by the dragon vein. It is the same here. The changes in the surging area will affect the area affected by the energy of the surging area. As he spoke, he looked at the land that was erected like a tower and pointed at the sky. After a moment of silence, he said, "It should have affected the sandworms first, but from the looks of it, there is a 70% to 80% chance that the affected sandworms are already swimming in the sea. By the way, can you survive in the water?" The last sentence was directed at the little octopus and the little seahorse. The two cowards had been hugging each other for a long time and had even forgotten to separate their tentacles from each other. They mumbled a long string of words in response. Well, the gist of it was that they had not tried it and did not know if it would work. The thunderous sound that reverberated throughout the land lasted for a full half an hour before it was completely quiet. There were still muffled, thunderous echoes in the distance. Hui only now remembered that he should say something, so he patted Yin Nuashing on the shoulder and said, "Feng, look at how much trouble your troublesome physique has brought to this world." Yin Nuashing said, "No one will think you're mute if you don't talk." After that, he angrily lifted the rugby ball that he was carrying on his back to the front and gave it a hard push, making it spin in circles. "What the hell did you do?" the ball said. Yin%. What followed was a very beautiful scene. We quickly pulled the two cowards and turned around. Don't look, don't look. The scene is too bloody and violent. Good children, don't look. Don't worry, I've dealt with it properly. Not long after they turned around, they heard the clapping of hands and Yin Nuashing's affirmation. We carefully turned back and saw that Yin Nuashing was still carrying something behind his back. He took a look. Well, now the rugby ball had turned into a barbell. The round part was not round enough, and the straight part was a little bent. Well, this was what he meant by dealt with properly. Hui was very used to it and was not surprised at all. Anything that was dealt with in his hands would not be dealt with unless it was beaten until its mother could not recognize it. Although they did not know what had happened, the world had changed abnormally, a change that was enough to change the whole world. They now felt that the atmosphere had begun to change. Their murderous thoughts were now filled with panic and panic. They seemed to have escaped the control of the abyssal death mist. This was something that Yin Nuashing did not expect. He thought that even at this time, the world's consciousness's control over the mortals would not weaken. Let's go to Coastal City. Since it said that the turbulence came from the sea of the world, we should be able to find out something there first. Yin Nuashing said and rushed towards the coast in a hurry. Hui was stunned for half a second before he quickly followed. He glanced at Yin Nuashing, who was in a hurry, pondered for a moment, and could not help but whisper, "What if we only see ruins when we go there? Then we can only go there." Yin Nuashing looked back and rolled her eyes at him. "We have no other place to investigate." Before they could even get close to the shore, they could already hear the sound of the surging waves reverberating between heaven and earth. It was as if a huge wave of millions of miles was crashing against the earth, as if it was going to shatter the sky along with the earth. Even the color of the sky turned dark. This was not a description, but the sun hanging in the sky seemed to be shrinking, and its light was also weakening bit by bit. However, the change was very weak. What the hell? What the hell is going on? Before they even reached the shore, we couldn't help but exclaim out loud. Right in front of them, over 10 to 20 humongous wet mountains stood erect on the ground. Seawater and many sea creatures attached to the mountains had been falling bit by bit from the 1,000-mile-tall mountains, falling into the surging ocean. He saw a thousands of meters tall creature falling into the ocean, but a wave just happened to come from the front, and that creature was nowhere to be found. Looking around with her soul, Yin Nuashing could not help but twitch. It was as if there were hundreds of thousands of pillars of creation in this world, but they were all made of the products of this world. Crash! The sound of the huge waves reverberated between heaven and earth. A gust of wind with the smell of the sea blew into Yun Nuoxing's face, and she frowned slightly. She felt the movement of the surging energy. Her nose twitched for a moment, and then she turned her eyes abruptly and looked at a place. Not long after she turned her eyes, a mountain more than 100 miles high suddenly burst into a circle of dust at a place more than 10 miles above the sea. Then, the mountain suddenly tilted from the top of the mountain and slid out of the bottom bit by bit, falling vertically into the sea, splashing a huge tsunami towards the coast. Bang! Some kind of cracking or exploding sound echoed in her ears. At this time, the mountain that had returned to the sea suddenly rushed out of the water like a boat, heavily covering the sea and causing another wave. Then, like a boat made of mountain, it rushed towards the coast along the huge waves. With this size and speed, it crashed into the defensive line of coastal city. Even if the energy barrier could withstand the waves, it would not be able to withstand this collision. There's something on that mountain. Hui rubbed his eyes and looked at the strange mountain that was floating on the sea and crashing towards the shore. He frowned slightly. He felt that his vision seemed to be blurred. Some white things were gathering there, like willow, the wisps like souls, like, in short, white things. He rubbed his eyes for a while and found that it was not the problem with his eyes. It was the white, blurry things that were taking shape little by little. They were white humanoid energy life forms and many other strange life forms. However, he could only see the outline, without any details. It was like a shadow, and this shadow was pure white, so pure that it was like a silhouette. Those unknown energy life forms, since they were formed out of thin air, they could be considered energy life forms for the time being. They used the mountain under their feet as a surfboard, standing on the mountain and roaring, as if to show their power. No matter how high or how big the waves around them were, they would not touch them, and even the waves in front of them would take the initiative to avoid where they had to pass. Phone! Hurry up and explain what that is. I don't know. Don't ask me. I've never seen it before. Yin Nuoxing angrily flung his hair, muttering to himself for a while before withdrawing his soul that had already extended out. Then he held his breath and said, some kind of crudely made energy life forms, no intelligence, no thought, one-time use, have power, and have all kind of strange forms. What do you think? Huey's cheeks twitched violently. Abyssal death mist spawn? But they have the power of order. If they are spawn, they should also be spawn of order. Yin Nuoxing nodded heavily, his extremely solemn expression telling Hui that he was definitely not joking. That unwavering expression made Hui dizzy, holding his head as if his head was hurting. Well, what is this? What is this world trying to do? He still used the vision of a yuanshi to analyze it. It was not that he did not believe Feng, but the shock he received was too great, and he needed to confirm it again and again. Then, he felt an energy presence similar to the abyssal death mist from those white silhouettes of energy life forms. But it was just as Feng said, order version of abyssal death mist spawn. If this thing could be mass-produced, well, the world of order might as well just surrender. They could not win at all. If the only power of order that could be used to restrain and resist the abyssal death mist was ineffective, then what was the point of fighting? They could just stretch out their necks and wait for the slaughter. Since there was no such abyssal death mist spawn outside, they could only assume that this type of spawn had not been known by their kind outside in the underworld. At that moment, Hui suddenly shuddered and looked at Feng tacitly, the flickering light in their eyes conveying the same message. Not a single bit of this world's information must be leaked out. Even if it was destroyed, it must not be known to anyone. Chapter 1505. Those abyssal death shroud spawns of order drifted over from the world sea. The wind carried away the unique fishy smell of the sea and the presence of the abyssal death shroud, blowing towards the entire shore. The rising and falling waves were all strange energy bodies of these white silhouettes. After the first mountain broke, several more mountains broke off one after another, turning into sailboats that carried the white silhouettes and broke through the waves rapidly towards the shore. They would crash into the shore with their own ships as the vanguard. The thick presence of the abyssal death shroud. The only difference was that they were in the form of order. This was a white silhouette that the two of them had casually caught when they arrived at the coast. They used a little bit of effort to confirm it. As for the changes in appearance, that was just a side effect. The side effect of the change in order was ignored because the inside of the abyssal death shroud was the same. They were all white, and there was no such thing as an inside of the abyssal death shroud. It was just a cluster of energy. Casually rolling the humanoid spawn that was caught into a ball, Yin Nuashing pinched it and threw it into her mouth. As we looked at it a dozen times but still could not stand it, she analyzed it on the spot. Dark red radiance flickered over her body for a moment before she nodded. It's exactly the same. The abyssal death shroud's reaction is still intense, but every energy carries the presence of order. The power of order is half chaos and half order. The side of order reacts strongly, while the side of chaos is as silent as the Dead Sea. Perhaps that is one of the reasons why the abyssal death shroud, could manifest order. Whatever the case may be, its complexity and troublesome does not pale in comparison to the inferior distorted life forms that Long Sky and the others had created. Other than that, there's not much change in essence. Then, as we have guessed, the power of order has weakened against them by almost 60%. Restraints and counter-restraints still exist, but the effect of each side is much weaker. They are more resistant to each other, and if they appear en masse at the front lines of the void, the duration of the battle would be extended by hundreds of times. This time, it would not be 100 million years, but tens of billions of years, or even 1 or 2 eras. Boom! With a loud rumble, the nearby coastal city's barrier flickered violently. The radiance of energy rapidly dimmed, and seeing that it was about to lose its effect, Yin Nuashing quickly threw a wave of energy over the barrier while he was at it. The vanguard had already brought the mountain to the coastal city's barrier, and the sailboat alone was enough to crumble the city's defenses. Now that the barrier was held up by force, the spawns all leaped from the boat onto the energy barrier. Yin Nuashing saw a huge sea creature crouching on his barrier and hammering it. Since the creature was just a white silhouette, he could not recognize what it was. After all, the spawns of the abyssal death shroud came in all shapes and sizes, and now that it was covered in a layer of white, he could not recognize it. More spawns surrounded the coastal city's barrier. Those white spawns were bunched together, and from afar, it looked like a white barrier with many loopholes and carelessness had wrapped around half of the coastal city's barrier. Yin Nuashing suddenly remembered the threat from the sea of the world that the young man, surnamed Qian, and the others had mentioned. He did not know if this was what they were referring to. If the abyssal death shroud was besieging the coastal city, then there were many things that could be justified without him having to put in so much effort to explain. This black, oh no, white thing was a loophole in the rules just by standing there. Against a world with such a low energy level, any damage they did would be deemed as an unsolvable disaster. Can, we suddenly said. Meeting Yin Nuashing's gaze, he grinned and scratched his head. I suddenly thought of this word again. Don't you think this scene is very suitable? Yin Nuashing was speechless. The coastal city that had been targeted by the army of manifestations was only separated by a thin barrier from the many living creatures in the coastal city. To them, the countless living creatures in the coastal city were delicious food, prey waiting to be hunted. Those frail buildings would not be able to stop them. No, wait a moment, he thought. The manifestations did not eat humans either. They only destroyed things, and their only purpose was to spread destruction and destruction to every inch of space that they stepped into. Although I don't know what kind of madness is going on in this world, I think it's best for us to go and help out first. We moved his wrist. That barrier had blocked the advance of the army of manifestations. A considerable portion of the manifestations had already circled around and stepped onto the coastal city, and there were even larger manifestations behind them. After a while, the coastal city would really become a tin can surrounded by squirming white shadows. It doesn't seem good to just let them land like this. Do as you wish. Yin Nuashing tied the noisy rugby ball with hundreds of layers of chains of order and let it float beside him. After that, he pulled out the Netherworld Ruins sword and gestured at the city twice. While he was thinking about whether he should just get rid of the coastal city along with the manifestations, he replied, "We have killed so many manifestations that we don't know how many more of them we've killed. It doesn't matter if there's one more on the scale of a world. Why don't we just cut it down with a single slash?" Hui was speechless. This guy had inadvertently said what was on his mind. Listening to what he said, it sounded like he was having a fit. The coastal city appeared to be unscathed. The most damage caused by the surging waves and the monster siege was that the outermost platform and the dozens of fishing boats that were anchored there were smashed into smithereens. All of them were destroyed by energy blasts and various natural impacts. Before Yanuashing could cover them with shields, they had already been smashed clean. At the moment, the part of the coastal city that extended into the ocean was where the soldiers and forces of the entire coastal city gathered. Then, half of the people were in a daze. They looked at the energy stones that were already packed full, at the white shadow monsters that covered the sky. They held the weapons in their hands and posed in the air as if they were brave and fearless. However, that did not change the fact that they could not hit the monsters outside through the energy barrier, and so they were forced to do nothing. Maybe it would look good and boost the morale of the others or something. A rift suddenly opened up in the ocean. Huge whirlpools appeared on both sides of the rift, digging out a large part of the ocean. The mountain peaks that were only a few dozen miles high suddenly sank into the water with a rumble. However, not many people were paying attention to the faraway movement. At the moment, the eyes of every living being in the coastal city were focused on the white shadow that covered half of the barrier. No one even knew that the barrier had inadvertently collapsed once just now. Huge energy stones that were not usually placed there appeared on many tall buildings in the city. Several people surrounded the energy stones, and every energy attack turned into a torrent that swept towards the sky. The counterattack of the entire coastal city set off a rain of energy here. The once peaceful and comfortable coastal city instantly became a fortress filled with the aura of war and killing. Yin Nuashing and Hui stood in the air and watched the battle. Hui pointed with a finger, and the energy barrier that had been defending for more than 10 minutes surged with a powerful counterattack, sending all the manifestations that were stuck to their barrier flying. The 1,000-feet-long sea monster was wiped out with a light flick of his finger, and the remaining manifestations all gathered at the bottom of the barrier. All the counterattack energy of the coastal city was instantly directed towards the shore at the bottom of the barrier. Those platforms were already filled with countless defensive forces. Now that they saw the manifestations all gathered here, the group of soldiers guarding the platforms were abnormally excited. Their short and medium-range weapons could finally be put to use. In an instant, the defenses on both sides exploded with their strongest attacks, causing the entire coast to boil. The violent tremors once again resounded through the sky, accompanied by a dull tremor. The other broken mountain peaks finally broke through the wind and crashed into the barrier, smashing the manifestations that were in front of them into pancakes stuck to the barrier. They were then sent flying by the energy from within the barrier. They did not suffer much damage, but it would probably leave a lot of psychological trauma. Oh, they even had their brains burned out, so where did the psychological trauma come from? Suddenly, a loud sound of rolling waves reverberated between heaven and earth. Yin Nuashing and Hui suddenly turned their gazes. They sensed that multiple manifestations with great power were rapidly forming. In just a moment, the several vortexes that occupied a large area of the ocean suddenly had huge, strange life forms emerging from them. The two of them could not help but clap their hands when they saw the 10,000-feet-size creatures. Familiar size, familiar to the point that they did not know what they looked like, and there was an internal scent. They had just said that without the large-scale manifestations, they felt that something was missing. The power of this world is still able to deal with the manifestations that are of the same level as them. those smaller ones, and the ones that just pressed against the barrier. If it was not for the fact that they did not have time to prepare anything, they should be able to take it on by themselves. We stared at the two 10,000 feet sized abyssal death mist manifestations and pondered for a moment. But they should not be able to deal with this big one. The forces of Coastal City are mostly defensive forces, much weaker than the forces in the Desert Sea. If they were to sail over, they should still be able to take out these two big ones, but the chaos in the Desert Sea is no less than that in Coastal City. Just the movement of the earth alone has caused them to fall into panic, and now they have no time to care for themselves. How would they have the mind to help Coastal City? Yin Nuashing shook her head. There were too many people gathered in the Desert Sea just now, and a violent movement had sunk many of the Desert Sea ships into the Sea of the World. The two strange life forms floating in the air quickly attracted the attention of the two big ones in the sea, and those two completely unrecognizable creatures locked their eyes on the two of them. Their huge bodies quickly crossed a section of the ocean that separated Coastal City from them, and raised what looked like tentacles or appendages to slap on the energy barrier. When they opened their mouths to roar, they spat out black seawater, and the faces of countless people in Coastal City turned black. These guys are really wicked. Disgusting. Boom! A dark red torrent of energy suddenly erupted in the city, and after a burst of energy as strong as the sun, a huge hole was dug out in the space and the sea in front of them. The two 10,000 feet tall creatures only had time to spit out once before they were instantly annihilated, and countless manifestations were almost annihilated. Only 100 or 200 manifestations were still charging at the barrier fearlessly. The counterattack of the entire city just now was like pouring water, splashing out waves after waves of energy impact. Now, almost all of the enemies were suddenly wiped out, and most of the energy stones were stunned. Only a portion of the energy stones that could accurately hit the enemies were still spitting out their anger, and the entire Coastal City had also cooled down by half due to this sudden scene. The brainless guys have angered a lunatic. We could not help but sigh and shake his head. Spitting on his barrier, wasn't that the same as spitting on his face? He hurriedly suppressed the thought. Maple had almost noticed his impolite thoughts, and if he thought about it for one more second, a thunderbolt would come smashing down on his face. The sporadic battles quickly ended, and the frenzied Coastal City gradually calmed down within a few minutes. As the group of white silhouettes disappeared, everyone noticed that the Coastal City's barrier, which had been standing tall in the sky just a moment ago, suddenly shook a little. Then it faded little by little and finally disappeared into nothingness. The seawater that had been thrown into the sky and turned into raindrops sprinkled evenly over the Coastal City, causing quite a few people to raise their heads, their faces still showing traces of fear and shock. Everything had started and ended too quickly. Even now, there were still some people who had not completely reacted and did not know what had happened before everything returned to normal. The occasional echoes between heaven and earth, as well as the sound of raging waves crashing in the sea, caused the people who had just relaxed a little to tense up again. They subconsciously raised their weapons and controlled their energy stones, but when they raised their heads, they could only see the rolling waves on the other side of the sea. They did not see those white silhouettes of monsters anymore. And if they listened carefully, they would discover that the source of the commotion seemed to be coming from the horizon, as if from the direction of the other coastal city. Phone, I'm afraid we won't be able to help the people in other places in time. Hui patted Yin Nuashing on the shoulder. The most important thing now is to stop the source of this chaos, that half of the world's consciousness refuses to say anything, but we can use it to find the closest place between this world and it. Only by suppressing the world's consciousness can we suppress this riot. In the sea of the world. Yin Nuashing's direct response stunned Hui for a moment, and he did not recover from his shock. He then heard the former say, "It mentioned this sea, not the sea of sand, but the sea of the world. But no matter what, it would not tell me the specific location, as if telling me a big place was just to play a trick on me." Hui was stunned for a moment and scratched his cheek. It was like telling him a certain place was located in a certain world's light cluster, a certain galaxy group, or a certain place in the realm of the gods. If the last detailed location was thrown away and it was just a certain world's light cluster or a certain galaxy, or simply throwing the three words realm of the gods on the face of someone who was unfamiliar with that place, he believed that that person would quickly go crazy. If they had the ability, they would probably want to capture him and chop him up. Looking at Yun Nuoxing's depressed and angry look, this was probably the situation. Just as Hui was thinking carefully about what to do with his arms crossed, he suddenly saw Yun Nuoxing lifting the rugby ball in front of her. She took a deep breath, pulled the chains wrapped around the ball, and swung it in front of her. The afterimage condensed into a large windmill about 10 feet in size, and all the rain falling from the sky was blown away. There was no rain within 100 meters of the ball. The rugby ball flashed wildly, and it seemed to be saying something, but it was tied up by the chains, so it couldn't even make a sound. Phone, forget it. Listen to what it's saying. Hui hurriedly pressed Yun Nuoxing down. Seeing that she stopped, he quickly grabbed the rugby ball and waved his hand to temporarily remove the suppression of the order on it. In an instant, an earth-shattering scream burst out from the rugby ball. Fight your mother. Hui quickly tied it up tightly and even nimbly added a ton of energy seal on it. He patted Feng's shoulder and said, Buddy, use all your strength. Don't show any mercy. Suddenly, a bright white windmill about 10,000 feet in size covered the sky above Seaside City like a canopy. The whistling wind startled countless people. Although they didn't know what that bright white thing was, the dark red power just now seemed to be coming from the center of the windmill. In the emergency and life or death situation just now, no one would care about what the mysterious thing in the sky that saved them was. There were still many things to deal with now. The World Sea Ring hadn't completely calmed down yet, so they couldn't let their guard down. Feng Ling, is it you? When Yun Nuoxing was teaching the carrier of the world's consciousness a lesson, she suddenly heard a slightly familiar voice calling out to her. As she turned the windmill in her hand, she slowly turned her head and saw a few people on a roof more than 20 meters away looking at her. Among them, a golden-eyed teenager was surprised. Standing beside him were the people that Yun Nuoxing saw that day. She didn't expect that she would run back to the starting point of this world after randomly finding a seaside city. Yun Nuoxing and Hui looked at each other, and many thoughts flashed through their minds. The former even forgot about enlightening a certain world's consciousness. The two of them flashed and appeared in front of the teenager, surnamed Qian. One on the left and one on the right. They pressed down on his shoulders and said, "The situation is urgent. Come with us." The teenager shuddered from a pat. 2 minutes later, in Seaside City, where a great battle had just ended, a fishing boat with a broken mast suddenly broke through the waves and headed for the depths of the world sea. The charred hull, the deck with several large holes, and the sides that were still leaking. Only heaven knows how the boat survived. Now, the fishing boat that was about to disintegrate was being forcefully pieced together by Yun Nuoxing and Hui with energy and rushing towards the World Sea Ring. The oncoming wind and waves slapped the faces of the few people on the boat, leaving them all dumbfounded. They couldn't remember what happened in between, and by the time they recovered, they were already out of the boat and rushing towards the World Sea Ring at full speed against the wind and rain. You still haven't told us where we're going. Whoosh. Feng Ling, it's about time you tell us, right? With one hand, the young man held onto the remaining section of the mast to prevent himself from being thrown out. With the other hand, he wiped away the salty sea rain that hit his face. Looking at the darkening sea ahead, he was filled with horror. In just 5 minutes, the ship had experienced up and down surfing, rolling sideways, diving, and rising into the air. It even went against the waves and did a 360-degree backflip. It made his stomach churn, and his heart almost jumped into his stomach. He didn't know if it was because of the shock or because of the turbulence. We're going to a place in the World Sea Ring. Yun Nuoxing turned to look at the ragged appearance of the teenager and the others. It was only then that she remembered to hold up an energy barrier to block the wind and rain, and reinforce the hull of the boat once more before saying, "We're going to resolve some issues. going to the distant seas at the critical juncture of the world's sea ring's calamity? The teenager's face was pale with fright. Threats from the deep and distant seas. Although we don't know what's going to happen, we definitely can't go near the world's sea ring at this time. This was the only useful information summed up over the countless years of the calamity. Today was the first time they saw the calamity itself. They thought that Seaside City would instantly turn into a shattered coast, but with the help of the two people in front of them, they somehow managed to hold on. Now that they suddenly set sail and rushed into the distant seas, he felt that everything was happening too quickly. Whoosh! Before the teenager could let his imagination run wild, he saw a huge thing suddenly rise from the surface of the sea. The huge body carried a faint white shadow, and they could barely make out that it was a physical existence. It seemed to be some huge sea monster from the distant seas. That sea monster was probably over 10,000 feet tall, and they didn't know if it came out of the sea to stretch or what. In any case, it just happened to appear right in front of the boat, and the tattered boat just happened to crash into it. The impact drilled a hole several hundred feet wide, and the remains of that sea monster and its green blood spilled over the sea, mixing with the sea rain that fell from the sky and splashing waves on the sea. Everyone, what the hell? There's no time to say more. We have to resolve the root of this calamity. Listen, this world has gone mad. It's more serious than you think. There's a lot I can't explain to you in time, but if you want to talk about it later, we can make a pot of tea and sit down and chat. Now, quickly bring us to that place. Yin Nuashing turned around and shouted anxiously at everyone. Young Qian's mind was in a mess, and he listened in a mess. His face was full of shock and fear. So where are we going? Yin Nuashing felt that the roots of her teeth were a little itchy. I don't know either. You don't know, but you rushed out with the boat. Everyone was shocked. I don't know, but you definitely know. Yin Nuashing's face was wet, and no one knew whether it was sweat or rainwater that had just fallen on her face. There's a place called the Surging Area inland, and there's a similar place around the world's sea, but I don't know what it's called. If you know, bring us to that place, the most dangerous place. Quick! Chapter 1506. The Black Sea rolled up waves that were tens of thousands of feet high, as if they were going to smash down the sun, moon, and stars in the starry sky. The huge waves formed a shock wave that was visible to the naked eye and scattered the sea. A tattered ship crashed into the waves at a speed that was completely inconsistent with its appearance, leaving a large amount of white foam behind as it rushed into the distance of the Black Sea. The ship was surging with an astonishing amount of energy. Wherever it passed by, the Black Sea and the lives under the Black Sea would all be silent like cicadas in winter. The white foam floating on the Black Sea was like a twisted crack all over the surface of the sea. This sea was originally a quiet cradle of life, but today it was exceptionally violent. The existence of some kind of power made it difficult to calm down. The waves and the storm were just a phenomenon caused by it venting its power. Along the way, the wind and waves rolled up the energy storm. The rough sailing method made the teenager, Uncle Zhao, and the others experience various forms of tossing motion on the ship. It was not much easier than the football that was turned into a big windmill. The teenager had to grit his teeth and endure the strange stomach and the dizziness from his brain that was about to go on strike to show Yin Nuashing and the others the way. They wanted to show that they were frightened, but the swaying situation gave them no time to be frightened. All the strength in their body was poured into their hands and feet. If they could not hold on to the mast, they might be thrown into the sea in the next second, and then pressed into the deep sea by the huge waves to dance with those strange life forms. Yin Nuashing's words just now scared the teenager and the others. Their minds were a little blank. But as just said, there was no time to be frightened. In the midst of the panic, the group accurately pointed out the correct route for Yin Nuashing. The group quickly sailed into the distance of the Black Sea. We monitored the movement of the sea and the energy of this world, and at the same time used energy to protect this group of people. The world's consciousness seemed to have finally been enlightened and used its own power and the power of the rules to suppress them. However, it was just a very young consciousness. Its power was too weak, and they were too strong. So it only wanted to protect the teenager and the others. Is this the right direction? We're driving a little fast. Can you still point the way accurately? Yin Nuoxing pressed the youth down and asked him to look at the ocean quickly. Yin Nuoxing had just finished vomiting by the side. Now that he saw the turbulent black sea that was like a rolling mountain, his stomach made a dull sound again. He forcibly resisted the urge to vomit 1,000 miles and used his own method to identify the direction. Yin Nuoxing had no idea how he could identify the direction in this dark sea, where there were no islands or other things. Even the sun was sick and had become dim. After a long while, the youth nodded. He looked at Yin Nuoxing, his face turning green as he said, "That's right, Luoyang is the center of the Black Sea. It's the main place where the Black Seas gather. I can only think of this place, but I've never been there before, so I don't know. Ugh. Are you going there?" When he first heard that Yin Nuoxing and the others were heading towards the most dangerous place in the surging zone, the youth thought that Yin Nuoxing and the others had gone crazy. But now it seemed that they were not only crazy, they might even be a little crazy. They were the only ones in the entire world who could drive such a large fishing boat into a speedboat. Not long after, Yin Nuoxing and the others arrived at the Luoyang Black Sea, which was said to be the center of all the Black Seas in this large sea area. He had just raised his hand when he violently stopped the boat. The entire silver-white boat was now covered in scars. After the forced stop, it made a strange creaking sound. The youth was thrown onto the deck by the sudden stop. Suddenly, he saw a piece of metal protruding from the ground next to his hand with a bang. His face, which was already green, turned pale with fright. Vortex! Hui stood straight and looked at the scene in front of him. He could not help but exclaim. There were two vortexes in the sea and the sky. The edge of the crimson vortex was close to the surface of the sea, with the tip pointing high to the sky. There was another vortex under the sea, dragging the Black Sea to the bottom of the sea. The edges of the two vortexes were almost overlapping, and even the direction of rotation was the same. I didn't see this just now. Huey's eyes flashed. Without saying a word, he suddenly rushed back in the direction he came from. The youth and the others were stunned. Yin Nuoxing knew what he was going to do. Such an obvious energy vortex. The bottom of the vortex was probably thousands of miles wide, and the top of the vortex was at least thousands of miles high. Even if the Black Sea was unusually chaotic at the moment, and it was difficult to see anything, the crimson color was unusually conspicuous. It was impossible to miss it. We came back in a few seconds. He landed in front of Yin Nuoxing and said, "We came too fast. We didn't notice that we had just passed through a layer of enchantment. Did you notice that the sea has become very calm here?" Yin Nuoxing was a little stunned. Indeed, if he did not mention it, he would not have known that the Black Sea, which was still raging with storms and waves, was now as calm as a lake that had been settled for thousands of years. The sky was still dark, and there was no wind or rain. Only the two huge vortexes were the only moving things in this space. After arriving here, all the energy reactions and movements had calmed down. However, they did not feel peaceful. There was still energy surging in the dark. However, compared to the chaotic energy smashing like a storm behind them, this place was really very peaceful. The huge crimson energy vortex gathered all the energy in this space and sent it to a layer of space above. The energy vortex lurking under the sea was the same. The energy they sent was also sent to the two spaces. We have seen this place from afar, but we still can't see. It's so different. The youth stood up straight on the boat. Looking at the shocking scene in front of him, he could not help but take a deep breath. My God, what is this? A special place. Yin Nuoxing squatted down on the surface of the sea and probed with his hand into the water for a while. Then, he said, "This area is gathering energy. A huge suction force is sucking the seawater that is filled with huge amounts of energy into this area. The Black Sea vortex is formed because of this mysterious area," the youth exclaimed. Yin Nuoxing shook his hand and was about to stand up when he suddenly heard Hui exclaim, "Foam!" There's something wrong with the rugby ball. Yin Nuashing grabbed the elliptical sphere that was bound by the chains of order and the seal with one hand and pulled it in front of him. Looking at the way it flashed crazily, he knew that it should be greeting him and his family. Unfortunately, other than himself, no one else greeted it. Ahem, there were signs of energy surging on it. It seemed that it was subconsciously absorbing energy after coming to this area. The smooth surface even had the severed tentacles and tendons that were cut off, as if it was going to turn back into a sarcoma. Casually, he set up an energy-sealing circle in the sky. The light of the rugby ball instantly dimmed several times, and the things on its surface stopped growing. However, he could still vaguely sense that there was a weak energy connection between the ball and the space. It pointed straight to the bottom of the sea, the bottom of the whirlpool. There seemed to be something there. Stay on the boat and don't move. Yin Nuashing turned to the youth and said, "Let us take the rest of the way. You guys wait here." After that, he took a deep breath and plunged into the sea. Hui jumped out of the boat and jumped into the sea, leaving the youth and the others looking at each other with nothing to do. In this ink-black sea and vortex, there was almost no other color. The energy that Yin Nuashing and Hui used to illuminate could only illuminate a distance of about 200 meters. Beyond that, it was a blur. Looking at the black sea rolling and flowing in front of him, Yin Nuashing felt that something flashed in front of him, but he also knew that it was just an illusion. Hui threw out energy barriers as he walked. Every time he threw one, he would rub it on the rugby ball and add a 2-centimeter thick rune seal to ensure that it would not be strengthened as it got closer to the place where it was suspected to be born. In the end, it would cause them unexpected trouble. Oh, Yin Nuashing suddenly made a sound of disgust and surprise. Hui stopped when he heard the sound. Suddenly, he felt a strong abyssal death mist coming from below, which made him slightly focused. He threw a ball of golden energy light down. As it sank, the golden light seemed to illuminate the corners of something, but the range was too small to see clearly. When the ball of light sank deep enough, Hui made it suddenly expand. The bright golden light was like a sun blowing away the clouds and suddenly exposed in front of them. The entire scene of the sea bottom was clearly illuminated. Yin Nuashing spat out a few bubbles when he saw the thing below. His shocked expression quickly disappeared and turned into contemplation. It was a black tree. If it was just a tree, Yin Nuashing's expression would not have changed. However, he had seen the tree once, 100 million years ago, when he was fighting with Chong Kong and the others. The latter took out such a tree at the last moment. Even after 100 million years, he did not remember wrongly. At that time, he was a little curious and a little regretful that he destroyed it. He did not expect to see the same thing in this distant place after 100 million years. We did not know this question. He was just looking at the tree with a normal gaze. Something like an energy carrier, a carrier of rules, and a carrier of consciousness. Plus the reaction of this rugby ball. Feng, this tree is most likely something that the world's consciousness made to affect the space in the real world. Yin Nuashing nodded and waved his hand as he approached the tree. Hui turned to look at the behemoth in front of him as he followed. It was a tree standing on the bottom of the sea, emitting a dim black light, which offset part of his golden light. Its leaves ignored all factors in the water and pointed vertically downwards. The trunk was engraved with black energy runes. If he was not mistaken, there were also such energy runes on the branches and leaves. It seemed that it was because of these runes that it could continuously absorb energy. Speaking of energy, the bottom of the vortex was connected to the crimson leaf at the top of the tree. This was the only leaf on the entire tree that pointed vertically upwards. The leaf carried a huge amount of power of rules, which gave him the illusion that he was looking at a world of light. After swimming a few laps around the tree, Yin Nuashing stopped at the place where he had just landed. He looked at Hui, who had finished his inspection on the other side, and asked, "How's the situation on your side? I didn't trigger anything." Hui shrugged. Although I'm sure that this is probably what we're looking for, the main carrier of the world's consciousness and the physical space. I don't think there's a second one. but how to get in touch with it, how to communicate with it, how to get into its space of consciousness. Well, I'm at my wit's end. I've tried all the usual means and even loosened a pine branch for it. I'm just about to catalyze it to see what it'll look like. Yin Nuashing was speechless. Ahem, if the usual means don't work, then let's try a special way. Yin Nuashing grabbed the rugby ball in front of him and pondered for a moment. Wait a minute. You're not going to connect with the world's consciousness behind this tree through this crazy rugby ball, are you? Hui slapped Yin Nuashing on the shoulder. The tacit understanding between the two of them had reached the point where they almost understood everything. It's very dangerous. If we encounter any trouble, we'll even be affected by the existence of this transit station. I'm afraid we won't be able to exert 100% of our strength. It's just a newborn world's consciousness. What are you afraid of? Yin Nuashing glared at him. Although it's a strange thing created by the abyss death mist, it's just a newborn consciousness that's a little more developed than the consciousness of chaos. You're in the Yuansha realm, and are you worried that we can't deal with it? We thought about it carefully and felt that it was true. He did not object to anything and quickly unsealed the rugby ball. Then, he put layers of divine runes on the two of them. Finally, he pulled Yin Nuashing's hair and wrapped it around his hand. Then, he pressed Yin Nuashing's head with both hands. Come on, I'm ready. Yin Nuashing was speechless. Hey, I'll kill you, okay? Although physical contact was required to bring a person to connect with another consciousness, but this posture, this guy was probably planning to connect physically. Yin Nuashing took the joking guardian off his head and knocked him on the head. Then he pinched him with one of his hands and pressed it against the rugby ball whose seal had been completely unsealed. Then he pressed it against the trunk of the tree. You're a rude and cruel sadist. Don't come over. A slightly violent sound echoed in his spiritual sea. Yin Nuashing felt that it was probably because he was a little rough when he brought people in. Anyway, he would not die, so it did not matter. After his spiritual sea went through a period of darkness and a tremor, Yin Nuashing could sense something. He quickly mobilized his spiritual power, and everything in his sight quickly turned into shapes in his perception. Before he could see what was going on, he heard a panic scream, as if he was going to be caught and dissected and executed in the next second. Don't go over. It's over, they're coming. They're coming in, they're coming in. It's over, it's over. The big guy was almost deformed by such power. Fight your mother. Finally, it ended with a violent roar. Yin Nuashing's veins were bulging. He seized the moment when the small one swayed in front of him and threw a heavy punch. You are so King noisy. The short man crashed into the big man with a bang, but he didn't crash into him. In an instant, the curses that resounded throughout the entire spiritual and consciousness space disappeared instantly. Then, Yin Nuashing noticed that two things similar to lines of sight converged on him. The two sons' faces turned pale. What the CK? When did you appear here? I've been here listening to you curse for 20 minutes. Yin Nuashing had a crazy expression on her face. She clenched her fists so hard that it made one's teeth ache. She ignored Huey's muttering behind her. It's only been 17 minutes. She said softly to the two balls, if you don't quiet down, I will make you physically silent. The effect was immediate. The two black suns fell silent. The small one had just climbed up from the big one. After thinking for a while, it stuck close to the big one and trembled nonstop. It knew that even if its cursing ability was maxed out, it would not be able to beat Yin Nuashing, who had maxed out all kinds of strength. Now that the real body of Yin Nuashing was in front of it, and she even gave it a punch half a minute ago, it was a little scared now. Well, I finally found you. Let's talk. Yin Nuashing continued to stretch her fingers. Suddenly, she smiled sweetly, bright and charming. But before that, let's settle the score first. Hey, Big Shrimp. Warrior, please wait. Listen to me. There must be a misunderstanding between us. The big one's deep voice quickly sounded. Hearing this, the small one also mustered up his courage and chimed in. It's a misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding, sister. Yin Nuoxing stared at them with a faint smile. However, when she thought of the urgency of the moment, she did not say any more nonsense. Forget it. Let's not waste time. You don't need me to tell you what I want to do here, right? The two sons looked at each other. Although there was no way to see the blank expression on the two balls' faces, he could still feel two blank thoughts. Well, you should make it clearer. Make it clearer, the small one muttered. Yin Nuoxing's cheeks twitched. She took a deep breath and said, "Surrender or die. Choose one of the two. This is an emergency. I don't need your answer. Of course, if you don't answer, it means that you have chosen the latter. Then, I will send you on your way. Now, I will give you 10 seconds to consider." The two balls were silent. The small son suddenly jumped out. "Hello, beautiful sister. Even you can't tell that we're mentally strong. I think you're asking for a beating. Oh, a newborn consciousness can't tell. Forget it." Yin Nuoxing's face darkened for a moment. Suddenly, she understood and her expression returned to normal. However, the small son was so scared that it trembled so hard that wrinkles almost appeared on its face. "Cough, cough. Let me say it." The big son pulled the small son behind it in an unknown way. It stared at Yin Nuoxing and thought for a moment. Then it carefully said, "Actually, we're too short of two." "What too short of two?" The small son jumped out restlessly again. It spewed out a black flame and pointed downwards. "Actually, there are two members down there, fighting." Yin Nuoxing and Hui were stunned. "Huh?" Chapter 1507. To be honest, Yin Nuoxing felt that the world's consciousness was a little abnormal before he came to the space of consciousness of the world's consciousness. God knows where it learned so many words from. It was also a little crazy and a little talkative. When he came into this space, he suddenly found that it was not just a lunatic but also a psychopath. Good heavens, it was divided into two, and it could quarrel with itself. In theory, there should only be one consciousness in the space of consciousness of the world's consciousness. Although he did not know what happened to the other one, they were essentially the same thing. If it was divided into two, then it was schizophrenia. Just as he was thinking about this, the two sons, one big and one small, actually told him that they had actually split into four, and that two of them were smashing each other's faces with bricks in the sea of stars. This was a little interesting. This spirit split was quite sick, but he didn't know if it could be strangled to death and be reborn. It was already so sick, and it would be too much effort to save it. It was better to start over quickly. The black sun slowly sank into the sea of stars, splashing up huge waves that were as tall as a few planets. The small sun also followed in little by little, but it was too close and was almost swept into the sea of stars by the waves that the big guy sank into the sea. The four of us were born in this empty space. It has been like this since we had consciousness. In the entire range of our cognition, in addition to this space where we live, there is another space full of life, a space closely related to us. The big one's deep voice echoed in the mind of Yin Nuoxing and Hui. That is the real-world space. You can also say that it is the real space. The real-world space is precisely the name of that kind of space. Yin Nuoxing explained, "And this place where you live is the space of consciousness. Using a life as an analogy, you are the spirit and consciousness, and the space outside that is closely related to you is your body." "I see," the two orbs said in unison. When the giant sun slowly sank into the sea of stars, Yin Nuoxing and Hui found a time when the waves could not affect them and went in unhurriedly. After sinking into the sea, Hui suddenly remembered something. "By the way, Feng, are we just going to let them go for beating and scolding you?" The two balls began to tremble violently. The scene of the entire sun trembling was a spectacular sight. Before Yin Nuoxing could turn his gaze away, they hurriedly explained, This is really a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. The small son's voice became a little shrill. This has something to do with us. The main problem is that we have ourselves. Then one day, we suddenly found that a few F*** unknown things with a huge disturbance force broke into our body, causing the whole world to become unstable. In a panic, we did not have time to do anything. We thought that you guys wanted to break in and cause destruction. It paused for a moment and could not help but continue. Actually, when you barged into the space of consciousness, I thought you were still thinking of killing us. That's right, there was. Yin Nuashing shrugged and spoke bluntly, scaring the two orbs. He glanced at them. Okay, you can continue. I have no intention of killing you for the time being. At least not now. The big guy made an O sound, then continued. Then one day, one of our consciousnesses went crazy. Hey, wait a minute. Isn't this jump too fast? Yin Nuashing and Hui were stunned at the same time. Just a second ago, he was saying that there were 4 consciousnesses when this world was born, and the next second, one of them went crazy? This matter was developing a little too quickly. The big guy's stomach rumbled for a while, and one side moved a little. Then he said helplessly, although it sounds like that, whether it's the space of consciousness or the space of the real world, nothing special happened during this period of time that was worth our attention. Then let's talk about that consciousness of yours going crazy. Hui scratched his head and said, after that consciousness went crazy, we left another consciousness to trap it in this sea of stars. It has been a long time, and now only the 2 of us are watching over the space of the real world. You may see it more clearly than we do. The little sun muttered. Its body spat out a tongue of flame in front of it. Suddenly, the light that bloomed illuminated the sea of the star field. Yin Nuashing and Hui looked forward together, and then they were stunned. The thousands of light spots and stars in the sea of stars lit up, and the gradually brightening scenery made Yin Nuashing think that she was really standing in a starry sky, forgetting that she had dived into a strange sea of stars to see such a scene. Then, she looked at the scene in front of her. A black star and a white star were separated by a starry sky. The 2 were a few times larger than the little sun, but less than half the size of the big guy. They seemed to be facing each other across the starry sky, or in the middle of a fight. The white and black energy intertwined to form a spider web bridge that seemed to connect them together. The 2 orbs were surrounded by a heterochromatic energy nebula formed by the collision of the 2 energies, like a butterfly spreading its wings. Wait a minute. Yin Nuashing abruptly turned her head to look at the land of black energy reflected in front of her, and her face twitched slightly. In this consciousness world, the big guy's size was about the same as some of the suns in the real starry sky, abnormally huge. In such close contact, if he had not known that these 2 orbs of light were 2 consciousnesses, he would have been talking to himself all the way. Yin Nuashing, who had been distracted for a while, did not have time to finish her sentence, but Hui helped to fill in the blanks. Let's guess, could it be that the one going crazy is that white orb? The little sun used its huge size to circle around them, and their hair was tugged as well. Then it replied, you saw it too? I guessed it. Hui covered his face and laughed bitterly. All right, he had found the source of the chaos this time. However, just in case, he still wanted to confirm it again. So, that group of derivations that were surfing on the sea earlier, oh, you might not know, that group of things with only white silhouettes, were they created by it? The big guy replied in a low, muffled voice, and the rumbling seawater trembled. That's right, that's its influence on the space of the real world, just like us. Although it was trapped here, it had gradually recovered recently, and the suppression of the cage had weakened. It wanted to directly control the space of the real world to recover its own power, and we were trying our best to stop it. Yin Nuashing was speechless as she tugged at her hair. The confirmation was complete, so that was what those order versions of the abyssal death shroud spawns were all about. That white orb was different from the 3 black suns here. It was tainted with the power of order, although he could not explain how a mother of Asteris Kur, this consciousness world, could give birth to such a weird configuration of 3 black and 1 white. We still did not mince his words. You guys were in this form from the beginning. It was dyed white after it went crazy, and we don't know what happened. The big guy said, well, it was just a matter of paint. My ass. That 1/4 of consciousness had completely changed from the chaotic form of the abyssal death shroud to the form of order, and that was a complete reversal of its consciousness. A consciousness born from the abyssal death shroud forcefully turned into order, The result was probably the same as a life form of order being tainted into a life form of chaos, right? Rule order? We gave Yin Nuashing a look. There are traces of a deep distortion. Yin Nuashing nodded and answered his question. I've just confirmed it with the little girl. And if there are no accidents for the beings born from the abyssal death shroud, it is normal for them to maintain the chaotic form of the abyssal death shroud. And that is a normal rule for them. If the power of order and the rule of order were to taint them, they would go out of control. If it was a normal Empyrean god of origin, its own order would still be able to suppress it, and in the end, it would either maintain order or return to the chaotic level. And during this process, it would be hard to guarantee that its rationality would be intact, but when this process is completely over and it completely calms down, the person would also wake up. It's hard to control the poison all of a sudden, but it's better after it's calmed down. Hui folded his arms and nodded. So what's the state of that white sun now? The deep transformation process has been going on for a long time, but it still needs a long time to stabilize. Yin Nuashing's eyelids drooped slightly. But this world can no longer stand its continued torment. And if I'm not mistaken, the stability of this world is gradually declining. And this process of decline should have lasted for many years. The two of you are outside, maintaining the stability of this world, right? The last sentence was said to the big guy and the little sun, and the two orbs lit up brightly upon hearing that. The action was similar to a nod. And after that, the big guy responded. But even with us maintaining the stability of this world, the balance of that world is still getting worse and worse. And before you came in, the balance was already on the verge of exploding, and I'm afraid it will collapse in less than 70 eternal days. 70 days? Hui was stunned. The little sun circled around him, and its light flickered. It's not 70 days. If you use your own time to measure, it's about 7,000 years. That's fast. If we came a little later, this world might have gone cold. Yin Nuashing spread her hands. The self-judgment of the world's consciousness would be clearer than outsiders like them. And since it said that it would only collapse after 7,000 years, even if it was too chaotic now, it should only be in a period of balance adjustment, a period of chaos, or something like that, similar to a scene of upheaval. Whether the life in this world could survive or not was entirely up to their own luck. After all, the caretakers of this world were already in a state where they could not even protect themselves. You want to save the life in this world? Hui suddenly looked at the big guy and asked an unrelated question. Are you talking about those little fellows? The big guy was slightly stunned and was silent for a while. At first, we did not have the intention to pay attention to them. After all, according to what you said, they are just appendages growing on our bodies, and we did not pay much attention to them. If it was not for this incident, this world would have evolved much more than here, and now we can only look at those little guys and observe their lives to pass this time. It's quite interesting, a little interesting. That's the normal view of a normal newborn consciousness. Hui folded his arms and nodded. In fact, in some ways, it was a good thing to have 4 consciousnesses, and he could slightly see a little difference. The 4 of them were not completely the same. They could monitor themselves, develop themselves, and when they mature a little, their personalities would also be different. The big guy's statement was actually very normal. He asked this just to confirm whether the world's consciousness derived from the abyssal death shroud was different from the world's consciousness of order. And now it seemed that there was basically no difference. They had the same view of the life in the world they created. How did that phrase go? It was a phrase that was easily heard in other worlds, especially the lower realms. Well, he could not remember. It seemed that he still had a look for Maple. You want to say, the heavenly axiom is merciless? Or the heavenly axiom is merciless? Or something inhumane? Yin Nuashing frowned as she listened, and her face looked like she had a headache. I remember the latter half of the sentence, with something, I can't remember. Anyway, that's what it means. How can you remember so many of these things? But that sentence is actually not wrong. Yin Nuashing flicked her sleeve and patted her robe. Although it is the world that I created that gives birth to life, but most of the consciousnesses are too lazy to care. After all, looking at those lives is like looking at roundworms, parasites, and lice in the stomach. As for the heavenly gods, when they create their own world, if they want to take care of it, they will generally take care of it seriously, and not the kind that hangs in the sky and does not care about anything. Hui folded his arms and listened carefully, nodding seriously, and then was stunned. Now, is not the time to talk about these things? You are the one who talked to me. If you guys continue to talk, I will be pressed to death in this bathhouse. Suddenly, a somewhat helpless and tender voice sounded, startling both Yin Nuashing and Hui. The two turned their heads to look at the black sphere that was confronting the white sun. They saw that the surface of the black sphere suddenly surged with huge waves, and a part of the light suddenly became transparent, allowing them to see the center of the extremely dense consciousness sphere. There was a little girl in gray-blue clothes floating there, looking at them with a gloomy face. "Why are you here?" Hui was so shocked that he jumped back half a step in fright. "I have been floating here for a long time, waiting for you guys to get me back." "Oh, is she a friend of yours?" The big guy's voice boomed. "She is not as lucky as you guys. You landed directly in the center of our reality space, where the laws and order are normal, but she and another person floated in a place where the laws and order are chaotic, and we got them back." "Another person? Where is the other person?" Yin Nuashing's gaze suddenly became sharp, and she raised her hand to take out the Netherworld Ruin Sword. She took it out, but she was in someone else's consciousness, so she could not take out the Netherworld Ruin Sword. The big guy spat a pillar of fire forward, and a crack suddenly appeared in the white sun in the distance. A tall person was lying upright in the crack, and it looked like it was indeed Bei Hao. Half of the chains of order were still tied up on his body, but looking at his situation, it seemed that he had closed his eyes for a long time, and even his soul was not left. Unfortunately, he floated to a place further away, and we did not have time to rescue him. It snatched him before we did, and used him to strengthen and restore its own strength, so you could see that attack. Now the reality space is also chaotic. The big guy let out a long sigh of relief. He died just like that. Huey's face twitched. That guy had been fighting with them for 4 hours in the void, and he had dragged Maple to help, but Beihao was only half crippled. He wanted to bring him back to ask some questions, but he did not expect the primeval heavenly god to be gone just like that. Then there's only the other guy who was injected with stimulants left. Yin Nuashing, can you guys stop chatting? Quick, give me a hand. The little girl saw that they were talking among themselves again, and she was so anxious that her face turned red. The consciousness on the other side is too exaggerated, just like you, half orderly and half chaotic. This guy who asked for my help can't handle it. The other two consciousnesses can't do anything either. Quick, come and save me. Don't be like this. I can still hold on for a while. Suddenly, another weak voice sounded. It was a little weak, like a child's voice. 7,000 years passed in the blink of an eye. I'm still busy and don't want to be buried with you. The little girl pulled her hair frantically, but she could not leave this time. If she forced herself to leave, this consciousness would be drowned by the other white consciousness in an instant, and then there would be no more then. Yin Nuashing was silent. Although 7,000 years is very short, it is not to the point where it will pass in the blink of an eye, unless they plan to just watch here for 7,000 years. All right, it just so happens that we don't have much time left. Although we've been nagging for a long time, we really don't have much time left. Hui shrugged and looked at the big guy. How do we help? Do we just have to get rid of that consciousness? No way. The little son was instantly enraged, and the tongues of fire that were spewing out from all directions made it look like a hedgehog. If you get rid of it, this consciousness space will lose a quarter of its integrity, and we will all collapse together. Hui, who was just about to carry out the purification, was stunned when he heard this. He laughed dryly and put down his rolled-up sleeves. Then what should we do? Purify it? The big guy's voice also became a little awkward. If we could get rid of it, we wouldn't have dragged it on for so long. After all, we have 3/4 of the power. It is still possible to pay a little price to annihilate it, but that will kill us all together. Hui slapped his head and looked at Feng Gao. He raised his hands high and said, I have no other way, Feng. I will leave the current situation to you, the expert, to solve it. Yin Nuoxing widened her eyes. You, the heavenly god of the origin, are talking to me, who is at the peak of the origin. Where did you break through to? Hui scratched his head and laughed foolishly. Anyway, it's not in the brain. Yin Nuoxing and the balls. Glancing at Hui, who had given up thinking, Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath and shook her head with a headache. All right, there are 3 solutions, but first ask yourselves if you have a solution. If there is, I won't say it. It's the backup plan, the kind that you can't solve by yourself and have others do it for you. The 3 balls suddenly flashed. No, there is none at all. Yin Nuoxing face-bombed and took a deep breath. All right, I'll go. I'll do it. The method is also very simple. First, get a heart of the world to stabilize this world. If the world is completed, this consciousness space will not collapse together with it. The missing part of the consciousness will collapse because you have not completed the transformation of the world, and there are still many loopholes. Also, as we said, purify it. As for the third method, well, let me poke it. Huey's cheeks twitched. I'm afraid that if you poke it, it will burst. Chapter 1508. The so-called poking was not an artistic description. He just wanted to poke the patient. That was the fastest method. It was much simpler than getting a world core to help develop a world and purify it. He just didn't know what the patient was thinking about it. Poke. Huey's face darkened when he heard this. He scratched the back of his head. After thinking for a while, he could not help but ask, how do you poke it? Just a poke, just a poke. Yin Nuoxing answered as he took out the Netherworld Ruin Sword. He looked at his empty hands and looked at the 2 big balls. Hey, you guys release some of your spirit and rules. I'll take out the scalpel. Scalpel. Hui was stunned. The big guy and Little Sun also trembled. Little Sun thought for a while and quickly released the control and weak restrictions. After all, the existence of these restrictions was not much different. Feeling that the restrictions were released, Yin Nuoxing carefully sensed for a while. He squeezed his palm a few times and finally took out the Netherworld Ruin Sword. Then 2 types of order power surged wildly on it, dyeing the Netherworld Ruin Sword in 2 colors, one white and one black. You see, just a poke. It's very simple. Hui stared. What does this world have against you? Why are you doing this to it? That's why I don't know what you're thinking all day long. Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes at him. He raised the Netherworld Ruin Sword that contained 2 types of order power and gestured near his aorta. However, energy life forms did not have aortas. He then said, that ball is now in a chaotic period of order transformation. Its brain is like a piece of shit. The 2 types of order power inside it have not completely stabilized. As for me, well, in the entire world of order, no, in the entire void, in the entire Yuan realm, I'm the only one who can maintain 2 types of order at the same time. And both of them are energy at the peak of order. My power can be used as a catalyst to forcefully mediate the transformation process of order, forcing them to settle down and then become whatever they should be. Hui pondered for a moment and felt that it was reasonable, but he raised his head and looked at the 2-meter-long greatsword in Yin Nuoxing's hand. White and black order energy surged wildly, making him feel a little suppressed. Speaking of which, did Feng just use this sword to make a gesture near his aorta? This time, Little Sun was truly bristling like a hedgehog. Even her irritable voice became abnormally weak. You were really discussing how to solve the problem and not trying to kill us all at once? Yin Nuoxing grinned. This is the proper way to deal with it, and it's the fastest way. Getting the help of the World Core will take at least 70 to 80 years, and we don't have that much time. If we purify it, the balance will be broken again, and that guy will either go crazy or become even more chaotic. You have to withstand the destruction it will cause in the real world, and you also have to suppress the extent of the collapse of this space. Can you handle it? In conclusion, let me stab you once and be done with it. No, what if I break it? The big guy also felt his hair stand on end. Hey, look at this knife in my hand. Yin Nuoxing raised the Netherworld Ruin Sword and said, for you guys, this is just the size of a scalpel. It won't even break the skin. Don't worry, I'm the only one in the Yuan realm who can perform this surgery. I don't even treat normal people. Don't worry, it won't break. We looked at the Netherworld Ruin Sword and felt that something was wrong. Although the Netherworld Ruin Sword was only 2 meters long in its normal state and looked like a melee weapon, he could not forget the scene of Fang's sword aura destroying the entire realm of the gods. He pondered and thought that the scalpel had been used many times. Looking at what he had used it on, he had used it to open the brain of a person, and he had used it to consecrate the light of the void. When he threw this thing out, all the ghosts and gods within 1,000,000 light years would be scared away. Yin Nuoxing gestured with the Netherworld Ruin Sword. Suddenly, she felt that something was wrong and turned around to stare at Hui with a dangerous aura. Hui, I have a feeling that you're thinking about something bad. Cough, cough, cough. No, I'm just thinking about some details. Hui coughed violently and quickly denied it. After confirming the situation in detail again and again, the big guy, little son, and the other guy on the other side of the line were quietly relieved. There was nothing they could do, even if they were worried. At this moment, they did not have a better solution. If they delayed any longer, would they really have to sit here and watch for 7,000 years? Wait, I have a question. Hui quickly raised his hand. Where should I stab? Just poke at that consciousness, and that's it? Although they are divided into 4 on a higher level, in this space of consciousness, they are actually still one. It's just that the connection between them is a lot weaker. But the power of the Netherworld Ruin Sword maybe will connect them together. If that happens, this stab will go astray. In an instant, the 3 balls, who had just been relieved, suddenly felt a little nervous. Where will it go astray? If you don't believe me, you can stab me, Yin Nuoxing said as she stabbed Huey's waist with the Netherworld Ruin Sword. Suddenly, the 3 forces clanged. See, nothing happened. Wait, this fellow had just stabbed him with a knife. A moment later, the 3 balls threw out a head-sized ball of light that circled Yin Nuoxing. Hui and Yin Nuoxing went towards the white sun together. The weak aura of the 2 forces of order hit them in the face. Both of them were shocked. From afar, they did not feel much. It was only when they got closer that they could clearly feel the weak aura of the 2 forces of order fighting each other. It was really very weak. On the surface, it looked like it had stabilized into an order, but in the depths, the curtains of the battle had not yet been drawn. Don't be anxious, don't be impulsive. Your stab is supposed to suppress, but I feel that it can open a hole in the heavens. Although we have misunderstandings, it is not a life and death feud. If you really don't like me, I'll beat you up when we're done. Don't make fun of us. This space is very fragile now. I'm worried that you're stabbed. Shut up. I'm just worried. I don't mean anything else. Of course, I believe in you and can only believe in you. It's just that I'll open a hole for you, okay? Yin Nuoxing said gloomily. The patient is not moving at all. Why are you so nervous? Nonsense. That guy can't open his mouth now. Otherwise, he would have flooded this place with the surging river water. Little Sun instantly became agitated. The veins on Yin Nuoxing's forehead were popping. He was still calm at first. He had already found the right spot and was ready to stab, but this guy just kept talking nonsense. He was sweating all over and his hand really trembled. Fortunately, he had not stabbed yet. Shh, don't worry about them. Calm down. The little angel comforted him gently. I'll mark a spot for you. That's where the 2 forces of order are the most active. Just stab there and touch it with your sword aura. That should be enough. Now that you mention it, I'm even more nervous. Yin Nuoxing grinned. He was good at dismantling things, and he was also good at repairing things. Although he was the one who suggested it. Forget it. He should not think about it. Just do it and be done with it. Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath, grabbed the Netherworld Ruin Sword, and aimed at a spot, the spot where a golden light that only he could see appeared in his line of sight. Then, he casually pushed the Netherworld Ruin Sword forward. Pudgy! There should not have been any sound from the action, but for some reason, there was a sound as if something soft had been poked. Yin Nuoxing's cheeks twitched, but he ignored it. He took a deep breath and urged the 2 forces of order to surge into the depths of the white sun. Bang! Wah! Suddenly, there was a violent explosion, and the 3 balls screamed in panic. They flew around Yin Nuoxing like headless flies. They circled around him a few hundred times in an instant, turning into 3 halos. Yin Nuoxing was so scared that he felt a chill down his spine. He trembled and quickly stabilized the netherworld ruin sword in his hand. After waiting for a while, he did not find any movement. Then, as if he had understood something, he slowly turned his head and looked at Hui, who had a dignified look on his face. He saw that Hui was as calm as an old dog, but he was laughing crazily in his heart. Yin Nuoxing's forehead instantly darkened. He threw the netherworld ruin sword aside and rushed towards Hui. With a whip kick, he turned Hui into a meteor and rushed towards the edge of the sea of stars. How old are you? Why are you still fooling around like a child? Do you want to die? Yin Nuoxing breathed a sigh of relief. He was really scared by Hui's bang just now. After he calmed down, he returned to the netherworld ruin sword. Just as he was about to check the condition of the white sun, there was a violent tremor in the space of consciousness. Then, the 3 balls that were flying around in a panic were stunned. The group of people looked at the violent tremor in the space in a daze, and they felt a little scared. Hui, who was fooling around, flew back from afar. He glanced at Yin Nuoxing and quickly said, could it be because of me? If something really happens, you'll have to bear the blame yourself. Yin Nuoxing sneered and pulled out the netherworld ruin sword. Energy surged in his mind, ready to deal with all kinds of unexpected situations. A vast aura suddenly erupted from the white sun. The abyssal death mist surged wildly, mixed with hatred, resentment, murderous intent, and other negative emotions. Yin Nuoxing narrowed his eyes. Just as he felt that something was wrong, he pulled Hui and quickly retreated. Just as they were retreating, a huge crimson aura erupted from the depths of the white sun. It was like a fountain gushing out from the inside, and finally burst out from the surface. The crimson light of energy dyed half of the sun blood red. The threads that were tangled with the other sun collapsed inch by inch. The huge movement was like a wild beast that was breaking free from its seal and waking up bit by bit. Even the space around them was shaking violently. Just as Yin Nuoxing was wondering if this space was finished, the starfield sea suddenly lost its stable control with a bang and poured out in all directions. The seawater, with starlight, quickly invaded the space in other parts of the starfield sea, sending thousands of sparks to every inch of space. This huge starfield sea quickly dried up, and they were pushed back a little by the waves. The situation suddenly became very strange. Yin Nuoxing thought that no matter what happened, she had to suppress it first. She waved her hand and smashed out a formation on the ground. Just as she was about to rush forward, the shaking of the entire star field and the crimson light of energy gradually weakened. The crimson color of the star field also faded little by little. In the end, the entire star field was silent. The white sun also became much smaller, as if the crimson energy that erupted just now had taken away a part of its body. Oh ho, it's over. Huey's face suddenly broke out in cold sweat. He trembled as he looked around, and then he was stunned. The expected sun explosion and the collapse of the space of consciousness did not happen, but in the current situation of dead silence, it would be better if something happened. Don't worry. I feel that the situation should still be normal. Yin Nuoxing waved her hand at 1 person and 3 balls. The movement just now should be the energy that was hidden in it and caused it to change was thrown out. Right now, I can feel that its order is gradually stabilizing. If nothing unexpected happens, as for the order, it probably won't change and will remain in the current order situation. There shouldn't be any way for it to return to your state. But overall, it shouldn't have much of an impact. There shouldn't be any changes. As Yin Nuoxing spoke, he turned his gaze away. Even though he said so, he was still a little sweaty at this moment. It was impossible for him to tell the patient's family members that the operation was successful and the patient's condition was stable, but whether she would wake up or not, that would depend on. There was not much difference between being cured and not being cured. Oh, there's still a difference. At least the patient was no longer in danger. She would not take things too hard and tear down her own house. just when the three balls could not help but go forward to help, and Yin Nuoxing's face was getting more and more sweaty, a low voice suddenly came from in front of them. The white sun suddenly shrunk, and a moment later, it suddenly expanded. It expanded little by little like a balloon. Yin Nuoxing and the other two watched the white sun grow bigger little by little. It tilted back from a state of looking directly at them, and then quietly retreated for a distance until it became the same size as the big guy. Then it completely stabilized. A large number of white energy runes suddenly appeared in the star field and began to flicker around the white sun. Then it slowly spread to the distance and finally covered nearly half of the star field before it stopped. It rapidly became much brighter, and the dim appearance just now did not look like a sun at all. Okay, it's alive. Yin Nuoxing let out a long sigh of relief. At least he was not stabbed to death by the sword. He had even thought of all kinds of rescue plans. When he saw that it was silent just now, he almost took out the magic circles and pressed them on it one by one. The white sun hung in the star field and shone for a moment. Yin Nuoxing felt a strong spirit and consciousness emerging from the center of the sun in front of him. Then it slowly occupied the huge body. After a while, a gentle voice sounded in the star field. Finally, it's awake. Hui Meng patted his chest and let out a long sigh. Fortunately, I don't have to be the scapegoat. Phew! The little sun bumped into him, as if it was dissatisfied with his frightening action just now. Then it floated in front of the big white guy. Are you okay? Are you really completely awake? The three black orbs quickly circled around the big guy in front of them a few dozen times. They checked its condition inside and out. At the same time, they also checked the situation of the space of consciousness. They only let out a sigh of relief when they found that nothing was wrong. As for its color, just as Yin Nuoxing said, it still retained its dazzling white paint. Its presence was also slightly different from before. It was probably the effect of the switch of order, but it was not a big problem. The big white guy also checked his own condition. After a moment, he nodded. I can feel that thing has left. It was expelled by an energy of the same level, but more chaotic and violent. Its effect on me is still there. It changed the form of my existence, but the effect is actually not that big. Hui Meng put one hand on his waist and muttered to himself for a moment. Then, he poked Yin Nuoxing with his other hand. So what was that energy? If I looked at it just now, it should be the Abyssal Death Shroud? But the Abyssal Death Shroud wouldn't turn something that was also created by the Abyssal Death Shroud into that state. Speaking of which, there's one more thing. The green blood of the sand and the inexplicable pursuit we still haven't figured out yet. Just as Yin Nuoxing was thinking about how to get the right answer, the white sun suddenly spoke. About those two things, please allow me to apologize. I wasn't very conscious at that time. I was just acting on instinct. Sorry. So, the green blood of the sand and what happened after that are related to you. Yin Nuoxing looked up at the white sun. The green blood of the sand that the children call is actually the manifestation of the energy that turned me into this state in the present realm. It's probably some kind of energy condensation or something like that. The white man smiled faintly. His voice, which was as androgynous as the three balls, echoed in the space. At first, I was the first to come into contact with that energy. So, part of my body mutated and uncontrollably affected the life in the present realm. I lost control of part of my body. That was many eons ago. Then, when I was completely unable to turn the situation around, the energy suddenly condensed and formed in the present realm and became the green blood of the sand that you and the children mentioned. It trapped all the life forms that were affected by my uncontrollable energy in a place to be purified. During that time, I was slowly eroded and distorted by that energy. In the end, we made a place to isolate it. The big man made some strange gurgling sounds and monstrous waves of magma surged on his surface. But I didn't expect that it didn't survive. Instead, it was completely transformed into another form, and then let a consciousness in to help suppress it. You should be able to guess what happened after that. I, who had lost control, couldn't help but want to destroy that world. But I was blocked by that energy and was suppressed here, the white man said. Yin Nuashing and Hui both let out a long oh. The cause and effect was quite simple. It seemed complicated and strange, but in the end, it was actually complicated because they didn't understand the reason. In reality, it was actually that simple. It was just a normal consciousness that was distorted to an abnormal state, and, in turn, wanted to self-destruct, a mental patient who wanted to torture himself. What's with that energy? We asked. The four balls spat out a mouthful of fire, and the fire around the equator lapped in a circle. It was probably similar to a shake of the head. The white man said softly. It suddenly appeared and caught us off guard. Now, it has completely left. Foam? Yeah, there you go again. Yinuashing saw Hui treating him as a know-it-all. Her cheeks could not help but twitch. If you force me to explain, you remember how those creations of the distorted rules were formed, right? Hui nodded. Roughly, those guys in the underworld mixed a lot of fragments of the world, rules, and all kinds of fragments together. Through various means and the abyssal death shroud, they then let it evolve there. Until now, they had not gotten an accurate answer. They did not know what those guys in the underworld wanted to achieve through this path. They guessed that they wanted to create a life form of the abyssal death shroud, and by the way, affect the stability of the void of order and so on. They wanted to control the structure of the void. God knows if they stuffed something in when they were stuffing things in, or no, maybe on purpose. Yin Nuashing rubbed her hair. She remembered something. When Qing Qi and Bei Hao were still together, she and her little angel saw Qing Qi and Bei Hao extracting something from the creations of the distorted rules. Now, it seemed that the distorted abyssal death shroud that escaped from the white man and the abyssal death shroud that the two of them extracted that day were probably the same kind of thing. Something that can distort the abyssal death shroud. Something that can distort the power of Divine Destroyer can only be a more powerful force. Yin Nuashing murmured to herself as she rubbed her hair. Foam, what do you think? Huey's eyes flashed slightly. The green blood of the sand, although I still don't feel the slightest similarity from some traces, it is very likely to be another kind of power of Divine Destroyer. Yin Nuashing raised her head and looked at him. Only the power of Divine Destroyer or something more powerful can affect the power of Divine Destroyer. I don't think that the underworld can come into contact with the origin energy. As for the annihilation energy, I don't feel the kind of aura from the abyssal death shroud and the people of the underworld. However, we can't rule out the possibility that they are hiding in the underworld. I'm just guessing based on the limited information I have now. The green blood of the sand is the power of order. We could not help but say, the powers of Divine Destroyer we have seen so far. The fog of Divine Destroyer, according to you, the distorted race also have two types in the little girls. These powers of Divine Destroyer are all non-power of order. Feng, your element of annihilation was originally a non-power of order. It was only after it merged with the origin energy that it barely became a power of order. That's hard to say. Yin Nuashing took a few steps forward. We know too little about it. A lot of things are hard to say. Chapter 1509. Now that the will of the world had recovered, there was nothing to worry about. The calamity and turbulence in the other world would soon be eliminated. As for what had happened, they could not be treated as if it had never happened. Instead of thinking about what would have happened if it had never happened, it was better to save everything that could be touched. Yin Nuashing and Little Sun pondered for a while and came to a conclusion. Just watch. The splendor of the mortal world belonged to the mortals themselves. The two of them came here for a reason, and the two of them even caused a disturbance here. Wherever they went, the broken constitution would tear down everything. But even if they did not come, they would not have been late to the disaster. After all, the will of the world had gone mad and had been sick for a long time. At most, the two of them could be considered as an external virus that triggered the hidden danger. The more they talked about it, the stranger it got. After the will of the world could talk, they could sit down and talk about a lot of things. For example, their purpose of coming here, the world outside, their creator, and order and chaos. Although it was not clear how the world wills of the chaos plane could complete the difficult task of creating a world of order, it could be attributed to the general trend of the void. So Yin Nuashing and Little Sun did not care about it. It was enough as long as they showed that they were of order. During the conversation, the little angel came out to help talk about a bunch of nonsense in the void. At the same time, they let these beings who were fundamentally of the same race meet and have a few words. Although one of them was a life form of the abyssal death mist, and the other spheres were the will of the world, they were still of the same race because they were of the same origin. After that was made clear, the rest was easier. In short, Yin Nuashing wanted to pack up the sea urchin world and take it away. It cannot be left here, no matter what the underworld wanted to do with it. Since the two of them had discovered it, it could not be left in their territory. In short, you want us to move? The spheres expressed that they understood. The little sun's slightly impatient temper made it speak first. Or move to a place that is completely opposite to our order? You don't have to worry about order. Yin Nuashing pointed at Little Angel and said, "She's the same as you. She's been with me for more than 100 million years, and nothing happened. We can handle this." Yin Nuashing crossed her arms, pondered for a moment, and then said, "We came all the way across the void to find you and help you. Of course, we have our own selfish motives. Your creator wants to use your existence to do something to the void, or has already done something. Some things might have already happened, and it's not good for the void." "I think I've heard of this before," Big Bai suddenly said softly, startling Yin Nuashing and Big Bai. "You know? Do you know what they're going to do?" The big white guy seemed to have turned half a circle in the opposite direction, probably shaking his head. "It's just some vague words I heard when my consciousness first formed. Even now, I can't figure out what they were talking about. I just have a feeling that they were talking about our existence." Yin Nuashing twirled her hair, and her eyes flickered slightly. "At least we can confirm that they do know about the existence of the Abyss Consciousness." All right, the name Abyss Consciousness was just given. It specifically referred to Little Angel, Origin Sky, and the four spheres in front of them, which were special life forms derived from the death mist of the Abyss and had consciousness. After all, these people had different life forms, but they were indeed of the same race. Before they decided on what race to call them, they used this name to refer to them. Big Bai suddenly paused, and his light dimmed slightly. "I remember something. They seem to have said, 'Reshape the void so that it can't find this part of the information.'" Yin Nuashing and Hui looked at each other. They knew that the underworld wanted to do something to the structure of the void. Judging from the damage and influence they had caused to the void of order, they had indeed started to do that. And if Big Bai and Hui remember correctly, the underworld was really planning to reshape the void, there should be a very complicated process behind it. In this way, the speculation that they were looking for the core of the Eight Elements realm was more credible. They remembered that the little girl had said that the thing that recorded most of the information about the Eight Elements realm could be used to affect the void of the Eight Elements realm, even if it was just an empty shell. Reshaping the void was a very huge project, and it was also very troublesome for the Yuansha realm. It was a very difficult process to reshape the void from the rules and concepts, affecting the rules, concepts, imprints, and even the order of the void. But in theory, it was completely feasible. Yin Nuashing could also do it now. It was not difficult to reshape a small piece of the void. The trouble was to stabilize it and make it fit perfectly with the surrounding void. For example, it was like occupying and governing a city. It was not enough to just conquer it. It had to be governed well. "It's a big project." Hui shrugged. "I'm afraid they're already doing it. Judging from their attack on the Order Void, that's just the first step. They'll take it down and then slowly sort it out. But this speed is very slow. If they find the core of the Eight Elemental Realms, it won't be a problem for them to reshape this void on a large scale. Ahem, let's not talk about those things first. Anyway, that's what it is." Yin Nuashing coughed softly and pushed Hui to the side. "Pack up and get ready to move." Seeing that the four spheres remained silent, Yin Nuashing rubbed his forehead and continued, "Don't worry, we won't interfere with you even after we've thrown you over there. We'll find a safe place for you to live. You could develop however you want. You can even take human form and come out for a walk if you want. The only reason we're here is to take you away from this place and prevent them from discovering your situation. Not to mention, your current situation is already very stable. The order of the void will not affect you at all. There's nothing to worry about. There's nothing to worry about. Seeing his anxious look, the four balls gathered together and looked at each other. Lights surged as if they were discussing something. After a while, Big White pushed the other three balls away and said softly, "For now, we are more willing to believe you than the so-called creator. But it's not that easy to move the whole world. We're locked to the void where we are. We are prisoners of this void. It's hard for us to move, even if we want to. We can't do anything even if we want to. I'm afraid you will be disappointed." "Oh, what? You're worried about that?" Yin Nuashing let out a sigh of relief, patted his long hair, and moved his wrists. He seemed to be in high spirits as he said, "You don't have to worry about that. To us, moving a world is no different from moving a space. As long as you don't resist leaving, you can leave the rest to us." "That's good. Then we will go and stabilize this world. We will leave the rest to you." Yin Nuashing and Huidu heaved a sigh of relief. Finally, everything was settled. Since the little angel came out, she had only said a few words. After she finished speaking, she realized that there was nothing for her to do, so she went back into Yin Nuashing's soul world and stayed there again. The two of them explained some details and some minor details to the big guy and the others. Then, they prepared to return to the real world. They also had to make some arrangements so that when the whole void was cut, it would not cause any strange effects to this world. After all, they were professionals, so the necessary safety measures should be properly taken. After jumping out of the Black Sea's whirlpool, Yin Nuashing and the others took a few steps back. They watched as the two whirlpools between heaven and earth gradually shrank until they were only 1/3 of their original size. The crazy surging energy also calmed down a lot. At this moment, the two of them breathed a sigh of relief. "Feng, how did you know that the consciousness of this world would connect with the real world?" Hui asked Yin Nuashing while holding the rugby ball in his hand. "No, I don't know. I was just guessing." Yin Nuashing pursed his lips and took the rugby ball from Hao Ren's hand, which was one of the aggregates of consciousness connected to the present realm, and tossed it up and down. A newborn world, a sealed world. The self-born world consciousness can now sense the void, but cannot study it deeply and cannot understand the void. The world outside cannot see, and naturally can only observe the world that gave birth to itself. Just like a newborn child who likes to grab everything in its hand, using its own methods to observe and test. That is what most young world consciousness would do. Rather than saying that I know, it is better to say that I hope they would do the same. Observation and exploration are things that all sentient consciousness in the void would do. The rugby ball heard their conversation and couldn't help but mutter, "You guys are very strange. Since you came for us from the beginning, wouldn't it be better to just fight your way in with your strength? Why do you have to go through so much trouble to find the weak point of our connection with the real world before coming in? It's indeed convenient to fight our way in." Yin Nuashing glanced at it. Little Sun had a lot to say when it was inside, but it couldn't interrupt because its big brother and big sister were talking. It was only now that it secretly communicated with them. Yin Nuashing tossed it up and down a few more times. "Why don't you think about it yourself? We found you the normal way. You guys are hostile to us outsiders. If we fight our way in, won't you guys fight us as soon as you see us?" "How could that be? I'm the one who's hostile." Lil Sun mumbled and twirled in his hand a few times. "All right, actually you might be right. That's why." Yin Nuashing felt bored with the rugby ball in his hand and kept wanting to toss it around. He didn't know if it was because he was hugging Little Magic's ball. "In the beginning, we came here to get you guys away, so that those guys in the underworld, that is, your creators, can't come into contact with you. The worst outcome would be your destruction, but I hope to avoid it as much as possible. After all, you guys are the same race as this girl, or at least the same origin, and the same race. There aren't many abyssal consciousnesses like you guys in the void. If possible, I hope to negotiate peacefully and protect you guys as much as possible. Yin Nuashing reached out and stroked the rugby ball for a while. So, you don't have to worry about us doing anything bad. If we really had that kind of thought, I would have already done it. I wouldn't even say a second of nonsense. Little Sun felt that this sentence was quite convincing when he thought of the scene where this guy hung him up like a big windmill without saying a word. Young man Xian and the others retreated to the outside of the whirlpool and stuck to the edge of the barrier. They watched the dark sea become calmer as the whirlpool shrank. The few of them walked to the side of the ship and looked at the sea, sweeping their eyes around. I almost forgot about you guys. A sneaky voice suddenly sounded from behind, scaring Uncle Zhao so much that he almost jumped into the Black Sea. The young man trembled and turned around, only to see Yin Nuashing and Little Sun appear behind him. Well, they even brought a little girl back after going out for a while. How is it, the situation? The young man glanced at the little girl, then turned his gaze away and walked forward anxiously. When he saw Yin Nuashing and the others jump into the Black Sea, he actually wanted to go back and rescue them. If he didn't know that leaving this barrier might cause him to be crushed to death by the sea monsters outside, he would have really sailed the ship away. Oh, right, the ship was still a little tattered. It might not be able to last until he returned to Coastal City. You'll know when you go out and take a look. Yin Nuashing grinned and pointed outside with his chin, indicating for him to start the ship. The young man looked at him suspiciously, but he didn't hesitate. However, it took a little effort to start the ship. The kinetic stone was already on the verge of collapse from the process of speeding up and diving up and down and rolling left and right. It was a little difficult to start the ship now. The tattered ship slowly moved outside. The moment it came into contact with the barrier, other than Yin Nuashing and the others didn't feel anything. However, when they turned around, they discovered that the huge whirlpool standing between the sky and the sea had disappeared. The young man and the others understood some things when they heard what Yin Nuashing said. At the very least, they knew that if they couldn't see the whirlpool, it meant that they had left the area. They all breathed a sigh of relief. When they stared at the whirlpool just now, they actually felt a little depressed. As for the feeling, the young man took a deep breath. The Black Sea was unusually calm, and the scene of the sea and sky collapsing had disappeared. It was as if it was an illusion. The clear sky shone through, and the energy particles left behind between the sky and the earth formed a mottled curtain of light that fell on the world sea. The sky was clear, and it was a day suitable for fishing. Oh, now, it wasn't the time to talk about that. He just felt that the sky had suddenly cleared up, and the entire world had quieted down. He suddenly forgot how madly he had rushed over when he first arrived, and that suffocating feeling of uneasiness had unknowingly disappeared. In this weather, standing under the sun and taking a deep breath felt like his soul was being purified. Hey, don't be distracted. Yin Nuashing patted the young man's shoulder and motioned for him to look ahead. We're here. We're here. The young man was stunned for a moment, and then he abruptly came back to his senses. He suddenly realized that the sea below them was no longer the pitch-black Luo Yang Black Sea. Not far away, he could vaguely see the shore. He rubbed his eyes to make sure that he wasn't seeing things before saying, "How long was I distracted for?" "Just 2 minutes." I sped up a little. Yin Nuashing took a deep breath and looked carefully at the world before them. They had been gone for less than 2 hours, and even he felt that a lot had happened in those 2 hours, especially the scene before him. Before they left, no one in the coastal city had recovered from the battle. They were still a little confused, and probably many people were still wondering, who am I, where am I, and what am I doing? The 2 hours had passed. It was really calm. Even the white platform that extended to the sea had been repaired, and some people had even begun to rebuild the ships that were not protected in the battle. How should he put it? It felt like they had passed the tidying and adjusting stage and had immediately entered recovery mode. The chaos had been eliminated from its roots, and the speed at which the battle in the present world had stopped was beyond everyone's imagination. Yin Nuashing used his soul to scan the world. The coastal cities that surrounded the world's sea had suffered a terrible impact. Other than the coastal city that they had personally visited, the other coastal cities had more or less had huge scars of war. Fortunately, they had dealt with it quickly enough, and the scars of war had stopped before they completely covered the cities on the ground. The footsteps of the war had probably ended not long after the spawns had come ashore. There were still many survivors, and the remaining casualties. If he could find a reason to comfort himself, he could just treat it as a training for the world. Because he really could not find a particularly good reason, and there was no such thing as faith in this world. Otherwise, he could have just fooled them by saying that God was testing them or something. Fortunately, the life in this world seemed to be used to such things. Not to mention living every day in fear, they were probably mentally prepared for death to come unknowingly. Under such circumstances, they could still live every day as if nothing had happened. It was not known if they were too careless or too mentally tough. Just like now, a destructive war had clearly just ended not long ago. And now there were people who were chatting as they repaired and were still in the mood to discuss the crisis around the world sea. Their nerves were a little tough. We could not help but say, "It's too tough." Yin Nuoshing's cheeks reddened. He raised his head and looked into the distance. The chaos had stopped abruptly, but the products left behind by the chaos would not disappear just because the chaos had left. The vertical pillars in the sea of sand and the many traces of the cracks in the ground would remain. Thousands of years later, they might be recorded in history books, recording what happened in a certain year and month of the world's chaos, what happened in the inland, what changes happened around the world's sea, and so on. When the tattered fishing boat had just docked, two little meatballs floated over from the coastal city and landed on Yun Nuoshing and Huey's shoulders. "You two haven't left yet." Yun Nuoshing and Hui looked at the little octopus and the little seahorse that they brought from the inland, standing on their shoulders. They were stunned for a moment. When they left just now, they had left in a hurry and even forgot about the two little guys. The little octopus let out a helpless grunt. It seemed to be saying that because of the great changes in the surge zone, the energy between heaven and earth was still a little chaotic. They could no longer trace the energy across such a long distance to their original place. And this time, the terrain had changed so much that it could not find its original place. For a moment, it was stunned and did not know what to do, so it could only hide here and wait for the two to come back. In short, the surge zone had changed. The energy between heaven and earth was still a little chaotic. It could not find the north and did not know where to go. "Oh, I see." Yin Nuoshing pondered for a moment, pinched his palm, and the energy condensed into two dark red balls, throwing them to the two of them. "Take this thing. It can eliminate the influence of the chaotic energy of heaven and earth on you. And then, go and find the place where the energy is the strongest in the surging area. Use this bead to leave a mark there. It can be used for about 5 or 6 times. After you help, there is nothing else." The two of them also had to be busy with safety measures. They needed to leave a strong enough protective energy in many places, such as the planar realm and the conceptual layer of the rules. This time, they had cut the entire void. Because they did not know how deep and how far the sea urchin was rooted in the void, they had to be prepared in case the cut went awry. So, they had to make all the defensive preparations in advance to avoid blowing up. Chapter 15:10. There was a loud boom. Although the commotion was huge, it wasn't the sound of something exploding this time. They were using their own methods to protect this world, mainly to prevent them from accidentally destroying this world. Yin Nuoshing knocked on the huge star pillar that was thousands of miles long. Its shape could not be seen as it was covered by the colors of the entire star field. This was a small pillar of creation made by the imitation of the pillar of creation. It could be considered as one of their unique abilities. This thing had no other uses other than stabilizing the world and helping to maintain the stability of a certain area. No, it also had some other small functions. After all, it was still a pillar of creation, just that it had the word small. It was very different from the real pillar of creation in the realm of the gods. However, it had no problem protecting this world. It could protect it for as long as you want. There was no need for maintenance for 10 billion years. no need for after-sales service. It could even be hung up until the great reincarnation happened. But Feng, I think I missed something just now. Hui scratched his head awkwardly as he walked over from the side. Yun Nuoxing, who was inspecting the small pillar of creation, was stunned for a moment. After a few seconds, she confirmed that there was no problem with the pillar. She then turned her head and asked, "What did you miss?" The hidden place is not hanging inside. Now that the internal rules and order have been closed, forcing it doesn't seem to work. Hui laughed dryly. The hidden place was bound to the pillar of creation. It was one of the law runes of the countless complicated laws of the pillar of creation. When he was dealing with it, his mind was always thinking about the troublesome matter of cutting the void, so he forgot about it. Yin Nuoxing pondered for a while as she twirled her hair. Then, she helplessly spread her hands. Forget it. Let them write a few more strokes in history. Anyway, with the existence of the world will, this world's development won't be too slow. They will understand what this thing is for. When that time comes, it won't matter if they want to tear it down or keep it there. All right then, I'll put in 2 more gadgets to make its function more obvious, so that people won't misunderstand it later. Yin Nuoxing shrugged and looked around. They were inland in the center of the sea of sand. The pillar of creation, which was thousands of miles high, pointed to the sky like the surrounding blocks of the cracked earth. It was as if a mountain had suddenly appeared among the mountains, making the surrounding mountains look like bamboo shoots that had just sprouted. If one stood on top of the pillar of creation, they would probably be able to experience the feeling of looking down on all the mountains, but that would have to wait until the people in this world could fly to see it. The little girl had been watching from the side the whole time. Now that they had finished speaking, she couldn't help but say, "You're missing something, and you're forcing something up there. Are you really not going to make a hole in this world?" Yin Nuoxing and Huey's cheeks trembled, and cold sweat broke out on their foreheads. Then they laughed and waved their hands at each other and said in unison, "It's okay, it's okay. We've already dealt with it many times, haha." The little girl's grayish-blue eyebrows could not help but twitch. "You're full of reliable aura." Yin Nuoxing and Hui shrunk their heads. They were relieved at first, but after hearing the little girl's muttering, they were worried again. They quickly went up to the pillar of creation to check it out. They were suddenly really worried that there would be a mistake or something in the end, and then they would be in big trouble. This thing is spectacular. The rugby ball that the little sun had transformed, and it could not help but exclaim. It circled the pillar of creation up and down for a while before landing in front of Yin Nuoxing. "I can feel that the stability of this world is quickly recovering, and the chaotic energy between heaven and earth is quickly calming down. A weakened version of our specialty, the best choice to assist in stabilizing the world. You deserve it." Hui grinned and gestured to the rugby ball. Yin Nuoxing was speechless. What kind of advertisement was this? Since when did the pillar of creation become a specialty? We're almost done here. We've also confirmed that the pillar of creation is connected to the energy runes left in various places of this world. This world is now under its protection. We'll talk about the specifics when we meet later. Yin Nuoxing clapped her hands and said, "Gurgle, gurgle." After that, Yin Nuoxing and Hui were about to go to the remote corner of the sea of the world to make a final confirmation with the will of this world. Suddenly, they heard some sounds. Both of them turned around and saw 2 little ones stepping on sand not far away. They floated 4 or 5 meters above the sand and landed in front of them. They were stepping on sand and flying. But according to them, it was actually not flying. They were just using their own power to control and levitate above something. It seemed to be benefiting from the tentacles on their bodies. The little octopus circled Yin Nuoxing twice. Suddenly, it took out a round energy crystal from its back. Its tentacles wrapped the energy crystal and carefully placed it in its hand. "Gurgle, gurgle." For me, Yin Nuoxing was stunned for a moment. When she saw it shaking its tentacles and nodding, she looked at the energy crystal in her hand. It seemed to be some kind of energy stone crystal. When she looked carefully, she seemed to see something inside. If she put her whole eye on it, she could see very beautiful colors from inside. It was like a kaleidoscope, but what it reflected was not what should be in front of her. The little seahorse threw the same thing to Hui. Little Sun looked at this scene and suddenly said, "They're thanking you." "Hey, what's there to thank? We're just doing what we should be doing." Hui tossed the bead in his hand. Although he said this, his face was smiling brightly. It made Yin Nuoshing want to send him flying with a shoehorn. "Thanks." Yin Nuoshing reached out and poked the little octopus head. Then she pointed at the little pillar of creation behind her and said, "You can stay here in the future. The environment here will be better than other places." After a series of grunts echoed in her mind, Yin Nuoshing smiled and poked the octopus head again. "All right, you don't have to send us off. This part of the story is about to come to an end. Everything should return to its original trajectory. We're just passers-by, but the worlds are connected. After experiencing a turbulence, this world will slowly develop. After it stabilizes completely, it might reach the level of the source world in the void. So, in the future, we might meet again in the void. The probability is a little low. After all, we're still fighting in the void. We don't know when we'll die." Yin Nuoshing laughed and said casually, "In short, do your best to survive. The void is not lacking in miracles. Anything is possible. Let's go. Take care of yourselves. We'll meet again in the void." The two little ones looked at the backs of the three people as they left. They firmly remembered that figure in their minds. Their big eyes were shining. After appropriately saying goodbye to the people they knew in this world, Yin Nuoshing, Hui, and the little girl used a teleportation to return to the center of the Black Sea. This time, when they passed through the barrier, they saw the obvious ripples on the barrier. The scene in front of them also changed as they came inside. When they were teleporting, the little sun said that they were decorating their nest and dressing up. The three of them were already mentally prepared. However, when they arrived, they were still stunned for a moment. Looking at the place that had changed drastically in front of them, they were speechless for a moment. The place where the two huge whirlpools stood between the sky and the earth had now become a huge island. The island was suspended in the air in the shape of an awl. Its wide bottom was connected to a whirlpool-shaped seabed peak. At the top of this awl, there was a hieron which was much more spacious than the top. At the sight of it, Zhang Tai's heart pounded slightly as he was very worried about the people living inside. The hieron on the top of the mountain might tilt and collapse if they didn't stay there for a long time. Well, they could clearly sense the rules and the fluctuations of other forces. There shouldn't be any problems. They just didn't know if there was a special meaning behind the arrangement or if it was done on a whim. The style of the temple was a little dark. If it weren't for the fact that the style was different, Yin Nuoshing would have suspected that the dark temple he made in the future came from this. The style was something that they had never seen before, but if there was anything different, well, Yin Nuoshing felt that there wasn't much difference. It was also a big rectangular house. Maybe this side was longer, or maybe the other side was shorter, or there was an additional side hall. The overall appearance was just like that. As for the decorations and patterns at the corners, they were things that they had never seen before. This was also very normal. According to the origin of the four world consciousnesses, we suspected that this might be the style of the temples in the underworld. Yin Nuoshing thought for a while and felt that there was nothing to investigate, so he nodded and ignored it. The walls of the Black Temple were engraved with some strange patterns. They were completely integrated with the layout of the surrounding temples. Looking from the side, they could see that the other temples were arranged one after another. However, that side seemed empty, and it felt a little illusory. It was probably because they didn't intend to use so much space. It was just for decoration, and this group of temples was divided into a spacious area. There was an additional grassland at the entrance, and there was an additional open space. This place could be turned into a manor. Hui curiously leaned on the wall and stretched out his finger to poke at the patterns. He accidentally used too much force and poked a hole in the wall. He was so shocked that he quickly reached out to fix it. However, they had already filled up the hole before him, and it was as good as new. Do these patterns have any meaning? Hui quickly turned his gaze to the rugby ball, little son, and forced a smile to change the topic. If you want to say it, it should be considered as something. Little Sun paused for a moment and said softly, "It's something that exists in our consciousness and memories. It's something that existed in our minds before we were formed. In the words of a human race, this is our remembrance of the creators that we have never met." Are you trying to say that they live in your memories? Huey's cheeks twitched violently. Well, that's probably it. Oh, what's wrong? Your face is very strange. Huey's cheeks twitched a few more times. He took a deep breath and laughed dryly. No, nothing. I like this way of saying it. That's right. They should live in our memories. Yin Nuashing sighed. It was a pity that the grand, long-cherished wish could not be realized. Not to mention this era, just the 139th era alone was pressuring the end of the era. Those people from the underworld had come out to cause trouble again. So far, although only the abyssal death mist had shown up, there were no other characteristics that indicated that it was really them. However, he felt that the appearance of the abyssal death mist alone was enough for him to put the blame on those pesky people. The little sun took the lead and floated forward, bringing Yin Nuashing and the other two to the inner part of the temple. They passed through some halls and arrived at the main hall. This grand and spacious hall was very spacious. There were many openings in the hemispherical hall that allowed light to penetrate into the hall. There were decorations that looked like stars hanging down 2 to 3 meters from the ceiling, like a piece of crystal ceiling. A faint aura floated in the entire hemispherical space. Occasionally, it floated and gathered together, and one could clearly see that it rolled into a spiral that led to the top of the hall. Aside from these decorations, the only noteworthy thing in the great hall was right in front of them. There was a purple, curtain-like thing with a radius of 2 meters in the middle of the hall. It was a portal. Judging from the aura in the hall, it was the portal that led to the space of consciousness. "Oh, this is your hometown," Hui said. He looked around and said, "Where are you guys? Are you ready? We can start now." "No problem. Everything's ready." A soft voice suddenly echoed in the great hall, causing Yin Nuashing to raise her head. This tone seemed to be Big Bai's, but this voice, well, it was a woman's voice. The purple curtain in front of them suddenly rippled. The three of them turned their heads and looked forward. They saw a woman walking out of the curtain. She was wearing a moon-white dress that was so long that it touched the ground. It seemed to be made of clouds and energy. It was plain and simple. Her pure white hair was tied up into a butterfly-like hairstyle with something that they couldn't see clearly. Then she had no face. Yes, she was the same as the planet's consciousness that Yun Nuashing saw in the Five Elements realm. She had a human form, clothes, and facial features. However, she only had a nose and ears and no other facial features. Her white face looked a little strange. Where's your face?" Yin Nuashing subconsciously said this. After saying it, he suddenly felt that it was inappropriate. Lien Hui hurriedly covered his face. He was about to say it again when he saw the young girl walked in front of him and spoke softly. "I haven't thought about what to make it look like yet. Let's leave it like this for now." That's fine too." Hui, who was covering his face, began to shake his head. He quickly changed the topic before it went into the abyss. "What about the other three? Here. Aren't they just ready? Don't worry." As soon as he finished speaking, the curtain rippled again. First, a tall young man walked out. Then, 2 teenagers who looked about 15 or 16 years old squeezed through the curtain side by side. These 3 also had no faces. Their paint was black with a hint of purple in the void. Yin Nuashing glared. No, one of the teenagers had a dark red color. Just as he noticed the teenager with a different color, he saw the football flying towards the dark red teenager. How should he say it? Suddenly, he felt that the color of the football actually matched the dark red teenager. In that case, the family of 4 would be the gentle big sister Bai, the slightly calm and anxious second brother He, the frail little dark-skinned boy, and the irascible little brother Xiao Hong, who was either the 4th or the 4th brother. Yin Nuashing felt that this family would be very lively when gathered together. Then, he inexplicably thought of his family and sighed deeply. He finally knew where this inexplicable sense of déjà vu came from. By changing the size of the characters, wasn't it similar to his family? The grumpy little red was Yuan Kong's position. He didn't say anything. Bye. Big Sis walked past Yun Nuoxing without making a sound. Her long dress brushed past his shoes as she walked around him. Yun Nuoxing felt like he was going to be buried alive by her dress. As she walked, she said, "I've already sealed up all the places. If there's even the slightest difference, only the part of the chaotic space that hasn't been created will be damaged. It won't affect the places that already exist. The consciousness world has also been stored properly, waiting for you to make your move." Yin Nuoxing's cheeks twitched. Looking at the four faceless ones walking around in front of him, he felt a little creepy. He could not help but pick up a pen and draw normal faces on their faces. Such a rude idea circled in his mind for a while before he finally suppressed it. "We have also prepared the security measures on our side." Hui reacted faster than him. Probably because he had seen more people than Maple, he quickly adapted to it. After all, it was the consciousness of the world, and it could look like whatever it wanted. At this moment, there were still more human beings in their own world due to the general trend of the void. If there were more other life forms, such as insects... Oh right, speaking of insects, there should be more sandworms in this world. Why? Is it because the sandworms are not uniform? That should be the case. After Yin Nuoxing glanced at him faintly, Hui suddenly regained his senses and suppressed the same rude idea in his heart. His handsome face blushed, and he quickly coughed dryly. "Ahem, I have also stabilized the situation of this world for you. After that, you don't even need to do anything, and this world will slowly return to normal. By the way, I want to inform you that you are now in a rather remote place in the void. The energy level is not high, a little low. When we drag you back there, the energy level will be much higher. According to the mobilization of the void, your world will usher in a baptism of rules and energy, and there will be a change of heaven and earth. Now, I want to remind you, in case you don't know the situation and deal with it carelessly. Yin Nuoxing could not see the expressions of the four people, but she could at least see them nodding. She pondered for a moment and stepped forward to continue the conversation. Also, the cutting of the void has actually started half an hour ago. Now, we are using that pillar to lock the range of your world and gradually cut off the connection with the void outside. Perhaps it won't be long before you clearly feel that the already small detection range has shrunk again. It's just a normal situation, so don't be nervous. We have already prepared for this in advance. We are also cooperating with the strange energy to lock the range of this world. It won't be long before Big Sister Bai could finish her sentence, the space trembled slightly. A weak but unusually clear energy wave with the power of the rules suddenly spread across the entire world and into the small starry sky. In that small starry sky, the sun trembled slightly and its light dimmed, as if it was actively restraining its light. All the lives in this world raised their heads at this moment. Yin Nuoxing waved her hand and walked out first. The others quickly followed behind her. The group looked up at the sky. In the hearts of all the lives, they could feel that something was happening, but they did not know what was happening. They subconsciously raised their heads and looked around blankly. The people who were still busy rebuilding the city stopped what they were doing and waited blankly. The sky darkened in an instant as if night had fallen. The sun was still hanging in the sky, but it did not seem to be releasing such a strong light. It was only a blurry shadow hanging in the sky. If the light was a little dimmer, one could even directly observe its structure with the naked eye. The void has shrunk. He stretched his back and took out a gong and drummed from nowhere. Like a fool, he played the gong and drummed loudly. "Move, move, everyone!" Chapter 15:11. The void carried everything in this world. However, in everyone's worldview, for all sentient beings, the void could be directly observed, but they could not directly understand what it was and what was happening. Whether it was the heavenly god of origin or the heavenly god of origin, they had their own way of observing and understanding the void. They could simply use their souls to make contact with the void, or fuse their divine right into the void, or use various means of 2 or 3 transformations. They just had to turn everything they saw into information and feed it back to their minds. The first contact with the void was a very long process, so long that it was somewhat painful. If one directly came into contact with the void without any preparation, one's brain might be destroyed, and one would either become stupid or crazy. Even the most special life form would find it difficult to accept information from the void until their own laws had reached a certain level. Some rebirth state beings were even slower in understanding the void than others. There was a vague boundary here. The earliest they could reach the peak of the primal god level, and the latest they could reach the early stage of the second realm of the rebirth state. In the present world, understanding the void was a hurdle. Being able to use one's own method to understand the void was equivalent to stepping onto a whole new level. It also meant that one was fully prepared to face the real big stage of the void. If one was not prepared and rashly came into contact with the void, it would usually end badly. In the Temple of Consciousness, the red grumpy little brother was now lying on the ground. Not long ago, Yin Nuashing and the others were stunned when they saw it fall. It was Yin Nuashing who reacted quickly and quickly covered it with a layer of order barrier, which stabilized its consciousness and suppressed its dissipating consciousness. Don't recklessly come into contact with the void. You're still a little weak now, especially when the void in this world is condensed. Most of the information contained in it is beyond your imagination. Yin Nuashing and the other 3 consciousnesses quickly said, at this moment, the void in the sea urchin world was completely suppressed in this space of order. They used the overly dense void to protect this space and, at the same time, to isolate it from the outside world. This was to prevent some things from being inevitably included when they cut the void because of some laws and concepts. In the end, there were many ways to deal with the void. Only a part of it was physical contact and processing. Most of it was to tamper with the laws and concepts. If it didn't handle it well, it would easily cause a chain reaction and dig out the excess laws. If you don't understand, you can see the void as pieces of curtains and the laws and concepts as some very tenacious nets. The nets and curtains were attached to each other. If you use your hand to forcibly pull a piece of curtains, you will tear off the net below, and then the net will tear off the other parts of the curtains connected to it. You can only use a sharp weapon to cut them off bit by bit. The void in this world, including the main laws of the space of order, was condensed into one piece, revealing a large empty space without the void and with only a few laws. It was also convenient for the outside world to operate. Fortunately, this is the world's consciousness. If it were any other living consciousness, touching the void rashly would probably tear it apart. Hui squatted down and poked the red grumpy little brother's head. He then turned to the other 3 consciousnesses and said, although you know what the void is, a considerable part of it is incomplete knowledge and information that your Creator has instilled in you. If you really want to understand it, you will have to go through a very difficult process. Big Sister White was stunned for a moment. She looked at Yin Nuashing and saw him nodding seriously. He even gave her a serious reminder. Only then did she nod to show that she understood. Yin Nuashing did not say too much in detail. It was a very troublesome thing to describe the void with words. He brewed a pot of tea here. After he finished drinking a lake's worth of tea, he would probably be able to explain 1/10 or 2/10 of the void. It was always better to listen to others than to understand it yourself. So instead of chatting with them about the process of condensing, cutting, packing, and moving the void, it was better to let them see it. The darkening of the sky was one of the phenomena of the void. It was one of the most direct and observable phenomena. The other phenomena were probably unobservable. Most of the changes were happening on the level of laws and concepts. In the present realm, the sky suddenly became abnormally dark. The sky began to distort. If there was the light of the stars and the sea of stars, they should be able to see the sky distorting into various patterns. However, this world had not fully evolved. There was only the sun and the moon without any stars. With the naked eye of a mortal, it was difficult to see the distortions happening. They could only observe the darkening of the sky. Other than that, nothing else happened. From a certain point of view, this also prevented panic from happening. The void is beginning to solidify in this part of the world of order. The void barrier is protecting the internal space. Yin Nuoxing's eyes flashed a little bit. He looked up at the situation outside. The cutting of the void is already halfway done. This world doesn't even have a world barrier. For the time being, we are using the void as a substitute. There is no shielding energy barrier outside now. We can't cause too much of a commotion to avoid being noticed by the underworld. Don't worry, don't worry. Hui waved his hand. He and Feng Zheng were controlling the process together. Looking at the situation in the present realm, it was actually quite spectacular. Well, there wasn't even a star. The sky was dark and nothing could be seen. As for the outside of the sea urchin world, there was only a mist of energy in the void. Those things that looked like sea urchins were slowly shrinking back into the central sphere under their control. When the cutting is 90% done, use your power of divine destruction to hold up the barrier and block the last movement. I'll leave the rest to you. Yin Nuoxing looked at the little girl and said. The little girl blinked her big, grayish-blue eyes and tilted her head in confusion. Why 90%? It's fine to use the barrier now. Have you forgotten that there are 4 hours? The main thing is to move an entire world back. I'm worried that you don't have enough energy. Anyway, there's no movement outside now. There's no need to use the barrier, Yin Nuoxing said. The little girl nodded and turned her head away to meditate. A little grayish-blue energy appeared on her body. She calculated her own power and the energy needed to move a world that was not more than a third of its evolution. After a moment, she stuck her tongue out in her heart. Because she had to use the power of divine destruction, it really consumed a lot of energy. If she used the barrier too early, she might waste a small part of the energy that was just right. The desert sea and the coastal city lit up faintly. The light source in the extreme darkness came from the energy barrier that protected the city. The faint light shone down like moonlight, and it even lit up the land within 100 miles of the city. Hui suddenly muttered. He looked up and said, should we cut the moon and the sun? After all, we can still find new stars when we move to a new place. What did you find? Big Sister Bai asked softly. There's the abyssal death shroud. No, there's a very small part of the non-order precepts. It's like a seed that's rooted in the sun and moon. In the process of moving, this strange chaotic precepts might cause some unexpected trouble. Hui paused for a moment and organized his words. Also, there are many strange chaotic precepts reactions in many places in this space of order. We have to clean them up. At first, I thought it was a little strange that the world you created was a complete order. Now, the shrinking curtain of the void has exposed some strange places. Brother Arii scratched his head in confusion. Why do you think it's strange? Is it because of our order? Why can't a world created by non-order beings be order? That's just one of the problems, and it's not actually your problem. The underworld and the others had thrown many strange things into these things, and there are even more things that belong to the world of order. You used the materials they gave you to create a world, and with the influence of the void, it's actually quite normal that you would create a world of order. Yin Nuoxing explained while twirling her fingers. But because of your own factors, this world itself won't completely belong to order. There will definitely be some places, some corners that have traces of non-order energies. Those are the chaotic precepts. Those things won't affect this world much now, but they're like a fish bone stuck in the throat, a hidden wound, a hidden danger. They'll jump out to harass you when you continue to create this world in the future. When that happens, a small part of the space will collapse, and a serious part of the world will be completely destroyed. But that's because the world you create is not entirely your own power. Although many obscure corners of this world are filled with your marks, it still has a core of order. And you are the abyssal consciousness. It's not impossible to forcefully create something that's contrary to your own order, but you haven't reached that level yet, and it's quite dangerous. We said seriously, but now that I've helped you get rid of it, we'll be able to alleviate a potential crisis. If you want to continue to create in the future, you'll have to focus on studying the power of order. You'll have to pay more attention in that regard. You're the only one with the order attribute here. Yin looked at Big Sis White. Before you can fully grasp the power of order, remember not to be in a hurry to create this world. Being too hasty will cause your kingdom to collapse overnight. I've seen quite a few worlds' consciousnesses actively accelerate the process of their world's evolution without anyone's guidance. The consequences are unimaginable, but such cases are rare. Very few worlds will give birth to consciousnesses before they've completely evolved and remain calm. Without a sufficiently calm and stable environment, it's hard to give birth to consciousnesses. There are many special cases in the void, and you're one of them. Generally, such special cases will rarely be able to completely evolve into a normal world. Hui stretched his body and said with a lazy voice. Yin and Hui spoke one sentence after another, as if they were singing a duet. The four young consciousnesses were a little confused and did not recover for a long time. The sun hanging in the sky suddenly disappeared completely. It was swallowed up by the curtain of night. The already dim sky became completely dark. The sun and moon could not be seen. Looking at the entire world, there was only a lonely continent floating in this half-solidified void. The farther void was silently peeling away bit by bit, condensing bit by bit, and then separated from this sea of void. The weather is stable. The sun, moon, stars, and debris have all been cleared away. The only remaining world of order is forcefully hanging on by the rules. For the time being, there won't be any anomalies. After all, this was still a world with a lot of fragile life forms. No, the entire world's life forms were fragile. Suddenly losing the sun and moon, the already fragile world of order might experience a series of shocks from the rules. They had to carefully use the power of the rules to protect this world. So, the things that would happen in a world without the sun would not happen here. Unless the life forms of this world panicked and jumped off a building to cause trouble, there would basically be no casualties. Speaking of which, should they discuss with the higher-ups of the human race in this world? Forget it. They didn't have that much time to deal with such a troublesome matter. Let them experience it on their own. There was still a small-scale, slow adjustment of the heaven and earth after this. They had to adapt to this strange phenomenon first. After giving them a shot of forewarning, they wouldn't be so surprised when the drastic changes happened after a while. As the speed at which the void was being torn apart became faster and faster, that dense aura of destruction gradually permeated into the void of order. That strange aura born from the clash of chaos and order reached here and connected with the aura of order in this void, giving birth to some strange phenomena. In the sky, strange starlight suddenly stretched out a long streak of light in the sky. In the night sky, resplendent white and red lights flashed crazily. The entire sky was covered with gorgeous spots. Huge cracks flashed across the sky like lightning. As the white and red lights flickered, they appeared and disappeared. Staring at that phenomenon for a long time, one would feel pain in one's eyes. Won't the children be frightened? Big Sister Bai asked a little worriedly. It's fine. Yin covered her eyes and shook her head. There's no way for the eyes of mortals to directly observe this phenomenon of the clash of laws. In their eyes, the sky is still black. It's normal, as if nothing is happening. The non-order breath in this place is too strong. This is a scene that I've never seen before. The chaotic phenomenon produced by the clash of the energy of order and chaos would not be projected in the void of order. I didn't expect it to be so intense here. We rub his eyes. The black, white, and red light flash crazily. It was very uncomfortable to look at. The abnormal energy breath is a little affecting the operation of the power of Divine Destroyer. The little girl suddenly whispered. A trace of disbelief flashed across her eyes. She did not expect that her power of Divine Destroyer would be affected. F***CK. That won't affect anything, right? We jumped in fright. If there was a problem with the most crucial part of the teleportation, then all their efforts would have been for nothing. Actually, doing it for nothing was a small matter. They were afraid that if they were to be left here, there would be a little movement when the void was cut. But this was the enemy's base camp, the rear of the base camp. If there was a little movement, and a dozen primeval heavenly gods who were wandering outside surrounded them, well, they probably could not escape. Moreover, that fledgling and Beihao had disappeared for so long. They did not believe that there was no movement on the other side. At this moment, they had not encountered anything. Perhaps the underworld had not found where they were and did not know that they were right under their noses. When a slight movement was made, they would most likely be exposed. Looking at Huey's changing expression, the little girl shook her head. It's not a big deal. The seal and teleportation are ready. It's just that there's no way to confirm where the teleportation will be. It will definitely be back to the void of order, but the location may be a little off. Bang! A violent movement, as if the world had been turned upside down, suddenly came from the depths of this world. In an instant, it spread across the entire world. Hui felt that the void was forcefully frozen at this moment. He was so stunned that he could not react for a moment. After a moment, he looked at Yin Nuoxing and saw that his expression was so serious that it was as if he was going to start a massacre at the slightest disagreement. They were all stunned. Foam? What's wrong? Yin Nuoxing broke out in cold sweat. He did not have time to explain anything. He quickly looked at the little girl and said, "Use your power to seal this world of order. Hurry." The little girl thought that some kind of crisis of the highest level had occurred. Subconsciously, she used her strongest power. The power of God's destruction enveloped the void of order in an instant, reducing the sense of existence of the entire world to zero. It was as if it did not exist. If it was not for the fact that the void had not been cut yet, she would have sunk this world into nothingness. The atmosphere suddenly became deathly silent. Everyone wanted to know what had happened. However, they were all frightened by Yun Nuoxing's expression. For a moment, no one dared to say anything. Some indistinct voices reverberated in the void. It seemed to be the sound of a conversation. Huey's expression changed drastically. He instantly knew what had happened. There were people squatting outside. They could hear the voices reverberating in the void because their souls were still stuck in that part of the void. Just half a minute ago, they were still performing the void-cutting operation. However, he did not dare to rashly analyze what the people outside were saying. He was afraid that if he used even a little bit of power, it would alarm the people outside. Feng, are those bastards from the underworld squatting outside? Hui mouthed to Yin Nuoxing and even used sign language. Yin Nuoxing's expression was extremely serious. Even her nod was light. Her throat felt uncomfortable, but she did not dare to move casually. At this moment, her forehead was sweating profusely. Just as he was waiting anxiously, Big Sister suddenly came over. Her cold and weightless hand suddenly grabbed his palm. A weak power followed her palm and resonated with Yin Nuoxing. He was stunned for a moment. Then he understood. His soul grabbed the power of the world's consciousness and brought it to the edge. The voices reverberating in the void suddenly became clear. Missing confirmed. The last message came from the derivation sanctum. No traces of activity were found. Speculated that the traces of activity were erased by the sudden expansion of the derivation sanctum. Confirmed. Search in the surrounding void. How should we deal with the derivation sanctum? Detected that the activity is continuing, but the time is not right. Confirmed. Continue to place. Probing. Detected a weak consciousness. It seems that a consciousness has been born. Is there? Why don't I feel it? No, your judgment is wrong. There is no movement in the derivation sanctum, and the probability of a consciousness being born is less than 1 in a billion. Don't think too much. This model is the product of an early failed derivation. They wanted to abandon it long ago. How can a consciousness be born? But I really feel confirmed. It's gone again. It's probably a wrong judgment. It's normal. The earlier the batch of derivation sanctums formed, the more inclined they are to order. They are all failed products, and a large number of them have been abandoned. This one is still at the chaotic level, so it can still be observed for a while. However, I think it will also fail. After a while, it will have to be abandoned. Let's go. The higher-ups want us to confirm the news of Bei Hao and the lost newcomer. It's really annoying. After Bei Hao killed himself in the orderly void, the two of them are now so nervous. They're in the Yuanshu realm. Maybe they ran out to play by themselves. Besides, they haven't been confirmed dead yet, right? Stop complaining. There is one less Yuanshu to lose. The quality of the newcomers is not up to standard at all. The power infused in the mist of divine destruction is always a ticking time bomb. It's not safe enough. I feel that those fledglings will explode at any time. Confirmed. It's just an alarmist. Don't be nervous. There is no need to talk about unnecessary words. Go and find them. Okay, let's go. Other than finding those two idiots who got lost, we also have to take over their temporary mission. It's really annoying. The silence continued for a while, when the voices could no longer be heard in the void, and after waiting patiently for another 10 minutes, Yin Nuashing and the others finally breathed a sigh of relief. What the? This place is really not safe. Huey's face turned green when he heard that, especially when that guy said that he confirmed a consciousness. Everyone's hearts jumped out of their chests. They might have been sensed just now, but in that instant, they risked their lives to strengthen the triple shield again. In just a few minutes, they had walked back and forth on the edge of death. For the time being, it's safe. Yin Nuashing breathed a sigh of relief and wiped the cold sweat off her forehead. But there is no guarantee that they will not turn back. 3 Yuanshu heavenly gods. This patrolling force is really... Let's not talk about it. Let's get this over with and run. Don't stay here for a moment longer. Chapter 15:12. The sudden appearance of the 3 heavenly gods of the primeval beginning in the void scared Yin Nuashing and the others so much that their hearts palpitated and their heartbeats became erratic. In that short period of time, they were all prepared to fight to the death. Yin Nuashing had even prepared some things in the void in advance, although he did not intend to use them so early. After all, the time was not ripe yet. However, in case something happened, he had to ensure that they could safely return to the world of order. Fortunately, the primeval gods of the underworld did not suspect anything. They did not stay for long. Yin Nuashing suddenly remembered the fragmented conversation between Bei Hao and the fledgling when he came to the void. In addition to what he overheard in the void this time, he had a rough idea of what the underworld was thinking. The primeval gods of the underworld were so powerful that they could do whatever they wanted in the void. It was just that they could easily get lost, and there would never be any accidents. That was about it. Perhaps it was the original sin of arrogance. This group of lost races from the mythological era obviously felt that they were invincible and that the void of order was just a piece of cake for them. They could do whatever they wanted with it, and obviously ignored the counterattack power of the void of order. They were probably the only ones in the void who had such confidence, although in his opinion, such confidence was a little stupid. Ignoring this part, the content of the conversation between the 3 primeval gods made them a little concerned. The product of early, failed evolution, sanctum of evolution, chaos, and order, abandoned. These fragmented information were pieced together into a complete piece of information. They knew that these places used to evolve the consciousness of the abyss would become order because the raw materials came from the world of order. They were trying to find a way to solve this problem. At present, they did not know how many improvements they had made, but they still did not succeed. They also had to clean up the mess and deal with the sin of order and the shadow of order left in the void. This was to prevent the primeval gods of the underworld from exploding the void. However, whether these things were understood or not did not have any impact on the current situation. At most, it would let them know what the underworld was up to and at the same time learn more about it. They hoped that one day they could use this information to give the underworld a good lesson. As for now, this idea was just a pure idea. Recovering from the nervousness and chaos just now, Yin Nuashing and Hui both sped up. The void cutting had already reached the end, and the little girl had already used the power of God's destruction. At this moment, she was accumulating energy and preparing to escape with the entire world, ending this frightening journey. If she didn't leave this place, she would never be at ease. Fortunately, other than the appearance of the three guys who suddenly checked the water meter, there was no more movement throughout the whole process. Everything was normal after that. The remaining 10 minutes passed peacefully. This piece of void was completely broken off. The little girl repeatedly confirmed it several times, and with the help of the Nirvana element of Yunhua planet, she used a greater void teleportation to move the entire world and this piece of condensed void back to the real world. Boom, boom. As soon as this world reached the world of order, they heard a thunderous explosion, which made everyone's ears itch. Yinuashing even widened his eyes and stared at the void with all his might, trying to see what went wrong. The little girl understood before he did, and said with a dry laugh, "The two types of God's destruction power don't have a good compatibility. In addition, the teleportation distance is too far, and the location is in the void of order. Furthermore, there are still some non-order law fragments hidden in this world. With 3 or 4 factors, just tell me what exploded." Yin Nuashing waved her hand and said directly. The little girl scratched her grayish-blue hair and smiled cutely. It blew up all the chaotic parts of this big brother's world. Yin Nuashing's face twitched. She shook her head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. She looked at Big Sister White and said, "Now there are 2 news. The good news is that we are in a safe place. The void will recover from its frozen state in a while. The bad news is the part of the unformed space that you have expanded has been destroyed." Big Sister White was stunned for a moment. She thought for a moment and nodded. "The result is not bad. That is enough. That part was not fully developed in the first place. It should be rebuilt. This also saves us the effort of dismantling it." You can think about it. That's good." After safely arriving at the void of order, Yun Nuashing and Hui Zheng reactivated the frozen void. After that, they leaped into the void. After looking around for a moment, they suddenly felt a little lucky. At the moment, they were at the edge of the upper plane and the middle plane. They were far away from the chaotic void of order that was controlled by the underworld. However, at the moment, they were still in a barren place. The surroundings were dark, and there was not even a single world-like cluster in sight. For the time being, regardless of where they moved to, Yun Nuashing and Hui Zheng further treated this special world that crossed the void. They released what should be released. They tried their best to save what should be saved. Finally, they installed a few hundred layers of defense to forcibly stabilize it. Finally, they discussed where to put it. However, in the end, they would only throw this world somewhere not too far away from the realm of the gods. Or they would just throw it next to the realm of the gods. The heart of the world. We made a small version of it to make it easier for them to study it. Then, there's the barrier of order, and the void barrier. Since it is the form of a small world, we can't directly put the world barrier on it. Hui, is there anything else? Yin Nuashing said, as she threw her safety measures on this fragile, special world. Hui muttered to himself as he touched his cheek. We're still missing a normal cleansing of the void and the laws, allowing the inner void to connect with the outer void, followed by the laws. This should be more or less enough for them to work on for a while. As for the rest, we'll just have to wait for them to figure out on their own. If they keep working on it, it'll be as if we're helping to create that world. For the next half an hour, they were inspecting and dealing with this world on the spot. After dealing with some of the bigger environmental issues, Yin Nuashing slapped his forehead and recalled that the only world of order inside had already endured about 10 hours of darkness. Only then did he run to the nearest world and brought out a sun. He even threw an entire solar system into it as a gift. That world that looked like a ball and also like a flat plate just happened to be floating in a suitable place for habitation. After dealing with it to such an extent with ease, they finally calculated back and forth for a while and felt that there were indeed no problems. Only then did the two of them relax. In the past, I Ching and the others would be the ones to handle such matters. They had spent some time moving other people's worlds around the void, so they should be able to handle it. Actually, there was not much difference. Moreover, it was better for the two of them to be in charge of such a special case. The main thing is that I Ching and the others are still guarding the front line of the void. At the moment, no one else has the time to come all the way here to help us mess around with this world. We straightforwardly stated the reason. Yin Nuashing could not help but sigh. We could hear the meaning behind his sigh. The two of them turned their eyes to the front line of the void. They could not see anything from a distance, but it was not hard to imagine what it was like over there at the moment. From the aggressive phase to the balanced state, the other side had probably returned to the close relationship situation. Every day, they would fight back and forth. The two armies would harass each other. The fighting was not intense, and there was not much conflict either. What was important was mutual cooperation and complementation. Sigh, we've just finished here, and now we have to continue with another more troublesome matter. Both of them sighed inwardly. Whenever they thought about the void front line and the abyssal death shroud, no matter what good things they encountered, they would instantly feel a thick sense of exhaustion, unable to muster an ounce of strength. Of course, after the exhaustion, they would still have to face what they had to face, fight what they had to fight, and copy what they had to copy. The Long War had only just begun 100 million years ago. Under the guise of maintenance, they stayed in Big Sister Bai's world for 5 hours. After observing, they confirmed that nothing had happened. When they entered again, they knew that the world was impregnable and nothing would happen. They were just looking for an excuse to stay here and rest a little longer. Once the 5 hours were up, Yin Nuashing and Hui stood up gloomily, their faces ashen. Although I don't quite understand, you can stay a little longer if you want to rest. Big Sister Bai was a little confused when she heard them saying that they did not want to leave. Sigh, we want to, but there's still a lot of things to deal with. We don't have that much free time to rest. Yin Nuashing could not help but smile bitterly. After enduring the onslaught of 100 million years and relaxing for a few days, they suddenly returned to that atmosphere. It was as if they were enduring the last 2 days of a holiday. Their minds were filled with anxiety and calmness. On one hand, they waited calmly, and on the other, they wanted more time. Well, I'll come to you when I have time. Yin Nuashing took a deep breath and calmed himself down. Why struggle? What he had to face was an unavoidable fate. It was going to happen sooner or later. It was better to go back as soon as possible. We have adjusted the drifting trajectory of your world to our world. At this moment, it is hidden in the void and will not be discovered by anyone. You can be at ease and perfect your world. We have to face the things that we have to do. Originally, we did have a little matter to discuss with you, but seeing that you're all confused, especially since you're busy with the evolution of your world, we won't talk about it for now. When a situation has stabilized, we'll talk about it slowly. Big Sister Bai listened quietly and nodded. She reached out and shook Yin Nuashing's hand. I wish you all the best. Thank you for your help. Yin Nuashing chuckled. She turned around and disappeared from this place with Hui and the little girl. They turned and rushed into the void. They watched the world that only they could see slowly drifting in the void. They watched as it drifted into the darkness. It took a while for them to regain their senses. And then, Hui looked at the void in front of him. Yin Nuashing looked at him for a while, then turned to the little girl. So, how's the situation in the void? The little girl sensed for a while after returning to the Order Void, but she did not talk about this topic just now. At this time, she said, it's a relief. As long as the underworld doesn't do that evolution of the sanctum, the Order of the Void will be stable for a while. Yin Nuashing was about to say something, but the little girl shrugged. But even if there's a problem, there's nothing we can do. We've smashed so many things over there. Even if I handled it well, they'll still be able to find some traces of the destruction that the Void hasn't cleaned up in time. By the time they recover from the original sin of arrogance, there won't be a next time. Yin Nuashing pondered for a moment. What if they don't recover from it? Then I'll find a time to ask you out again. The little girl's face stiffened. She could not help but smile bitterly. It can't be. After all, we're a remnant of that era. We've lived through the era when the origin heavenly God existed. It can't be that we don't have a sense of crisis, right? God knows. Yin Nuashing and Hui both rolled their eyes and said in unison, I have a feeling that we'll have to go there 1 or 2 more times. They won't know what's going on if we don't destroy it a few more times. The little girl was speechless for a moment. Then, she could not help but cover her face. Well, we'll talk about that when the time comes. I'll also observe the situation over there. Now, I have to find a thing that worries me. By the way, I've been away from the Eight Elements realm for more than 100 million years. Did anything happen in the void? But you've been busy at the front line of the void. I don't know if you've noticed anything in other parts of the void. Yin Nuashing scratched her cheek. If it's just something in the upper and middle planes, I really didn't notice anything special. I think so too. The little girl smiled bitterly. None of them had had a good life in the past 100 million years. They were busy with the Great War, busy wandering around the Grand Yuan realm, busy doing things that they were unwilling to do but had to do. Just these alone had used up all their energy. She might still have the energy to pay attention to other things, but they were unlikely to have more time. The little girl sighed and shook her head. She reached out her small hand and patted Yin Nuashing on the shoulder. Well, that's it. We have our own things to do. We won't stop you. If there's still a future to speak of, we'll see each other again. Yin Nuashing nodded and watched the little girl go further and further away until she disappeared into the void. After a moment, she sighed and said faintly, "We're just surrendering under the general trend of the void. We've exhausted all our energy just to survive. If there's still a future to look forward to, I hope we'll all be safe and sound." Hui sighed for a while and patted Yin Nuashing on the shoulder. "Feng, this place is a little far from the place I'm guarding. I'll go there first. By the way, how are those two guys?" Yin Nuashing came back to her senses. Fledgling has been very weak. The suppression of the order will never let him wake up. As for Bei Hao, at first we thought he was dead, but it turns out that he's only in a state of suspended animation. To prevent any accidents, I've used 70 or 80 types of origin energy to suppress him. There shouldn't be any problem. Bei Hao was taken from Big Sister by before they left. At that time, they were so busy that no one had the time to take care of him. It was only when Yin Nuashing remembered the conversation between the three guys who checked the water meter that she remembered this guy. She tied him up tightly while he was still in suspended animation. He would never be able to get up and jump around in this lifetime. "Do you need me to guard one of them?" we asked. Yin Nuashing pondered for a moment and nodded. She took out a 1-meter-long icosahedron from her pendant. The icosahedron was blue in color and had the appearance of starlight. It was suppressed by hundreds of chains and 70 or 80 runes made up of origin energy. Even if Bei Hao had a monstrous power, he would not be able to break free from this cage. Then I'll let you guard this guy who's so weak that he's about to die. You can also use some methods to see if you can read his mind and find out anything about the underworld. Hui kept the cage and nodded. He then looked at Yin Nuashing. "What about the other one? Don't you need that one?" "Don't worry about that fledgling. He's not a threat." Yin Nuashing shook her head. "All right then. I'll let you know if I find out anything new. You just have to be careful on your side. Don't cause any trouble when I'm not around." Hui grinned. "Screw you. You might not even be able to defeat me." We agreed not to talk about this. The two of them conversed for a moment in the void before turning around and heading in different directions. The smiles that were still on their faces just now had completely disappeared. There was only a tenacious expression with a stern aura of war. When the ripples dissipated and everything returned to normal, they were still galloping in this endless battlefield. No one could stay out of it. Until the day of the end of the void, no one could stop. After leaving the front line of the void for a few days, Yin Nuashing thought that when he came back, he would see a slightly chaotic, busy, or messy scene of war. He had many guesses in his mind, but when he really came back and saw, well, a peaceful scene, he was stunned. He subconsciously thought that he had come to the wrong place. "Lord Feng," a gentle voice with some nostalgia rang beside his ear. This familiar voice let Yin Nuashing know that he did not come to the wrong place. This was indeed the front line of the void, and there was indeed a huge wall of black and crimson in front of him. But for some reason, the place that was supposed to be a battlefield was so peaceful. Turning around, he saw Jing Yuanji, who was wearing a neat and simple light blue dress, appearing out of thin air. She smiled at him and bowed. Congratulations on your triumphant return, Lord Feng. Yin Nuoxing's smile froze. It would have been better if she did not say that. But as soon as she said that, he suddenly felt exhausted, as if he had just returned to base camp after a tough battle. But it was actually not much different. The fatigue this time was no less than every violent conflict in the past 100 million years. After all, the place he went to was someone else's base camp, and the pressure was so great that he had to crouch and not breathe too loudly. Just going there, the halo of the death shroud of the abyss had multiplied his fatigue. He had to be careful not to use too much strength, and without much rest, he was transferred to someone else's world. He even had to perform a void cut and was scared out of his wits halfway there. In the end, when he moved over, he accidentally blew up someone else's foundation and did maintenance. Although those few days were relaxing, it was actually very busy. The more Yin Nuoxing thought about it, the more he felt that he had just gone on a business trip to the other side. Now that he had finally returned to his own territory, he could take a breather. Oh, right, there were also the 3 chaotic consciousnesses. They were now under the care of the little angel, and there was no problem at the moment. He hoped that they could grow up and be companions for the little angel in Yuankong. There were only 2 or 3 of his kind in the entire void. He could more or less understand how it felt, but that was all he could understand. It was impossible to completely empathize with them, so he could only understand. It was like waking up to find the whole world was bleak and gray, and he was the only one left sitting in the realm of the gods. It was quite exciting when he thought about it. All right. He was not a normal person, so he could not look at it from a normal perspective. If it were anyone else, they would probably want at least 1 or 2 people to stay with them. For example, there were times when he would feel lonely. Although it was rare, there were times when he would want someone to accompany him. Lord Feng. Jing Yuanji looked at Yin Nuoxing's changing expression and did not react for a moment. It's nothing. Yin Nuoxing shook his head and chuckled. I'm back. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.